Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Standing Committee meeting for April 20th, 2021 to order. Council, are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none. Administration, any changes to the agenda?
No changes. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Wilson. Council, Councilor Nelson.
Move to adopt the Standing Committee agenda for April 20th, 2021.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. That brings us to our first order of the day, Citizens Minute with Council. Ms. Anderson, are there any citizens who'd like to speak to Council today?
No one registered for Citizens Minute with Council.
Very good, thank you. Moving on then to our first action item, Hinton Golf Course Economic Opportunities, CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In November 2020, Council provided direction to administration to bring a report back outlining options for land consolidation at the golf course, as well as a separate motion to present options regarding potential economic development opportunities prior to the end of Q2 2021. As we were preparing to bring forward a report that dealt with both the land consolidation and the economic opportunities, administration split the report in order to provide for the timely management of inquiries on the golf course lands and business from private interest. The rationale for this was in that potential interest may not include acquisition of all lands used in the current golf footprint, as well as the direction that council may wish to take on the potential options for management, ownership, or use of the golf course and lands may mean that direction for land consolidation could be focused on a few impactful options brought forward in a report at a later date. Within the report that's before council tonight, 3 options are included that uphold golf as a requisite for potential economic activity. They include contracting out the provision of golf, such as the status quo operation of the golf course by the Golfing Society, town-operated golf course, or privatized golf through sale of the business and the lands, or a hybrid model approach. In order to fully understand the interest in the market for golf course, business, and lands, administration is recommending that an expression of interest process be considered that will allow interested parties, including those who wish to operate or contract out operations, purchase or lease the facility with or without potential additional development or accessory business through tourism, hospitality, or anything further. And then as well, any other option that may not be recognized or understood as potential at this time to provide golf in Hinton. This would allow a transparent process to research tangible options that council may consider, as well as for interested parties to seek out confidential audience of council through the process, which administration has received requests for. The recommended option tonight is that committee recommend council direct administration to undertake an expression of interest process that upholds the availability of golf in Hinton as a requisite component of the EOI. Council may also elect to remove this as a component of the EOI requirement or add any other condition that supports council's intention for the property and business. Mr. Rousseau and Mr. Kovac are both present tonight to assist in answering any of council's questions. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, CEO Olson. Over to us, council. Any comments, questions, motions? Councilor Nelson.
What is the timeline we're looking at for this expression of interest to kind of kick off and then subsequently kind of close?
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The timeline, time is of the essence with the agreement with the Golfing Society to expire at the end of October. We'd like to have an idea of what council is interested in pursuing prior to that. So to prepare the EOI documentation shouldn't take too long, week and a half. We would need to bring this item to council for formal direction to move into an EOI process. So that would be the first step. Then the preparation of the documents, and then providing ample time for interested parties to submit their proposals or submissions. Typically, we give about 3 to 4 weeks for a process like this, an RFP process, to be open, just to allow for folks to prepare and submit. At that point, we would bring the submissions to council and have a closed session discussion at that point to determine next steps. So we'd be looking to wrap this up by the end of June, early July. And understand if there's anything further that council would want to direct administration to, or anything we need to follow up on or pursue further. So looking to move through this swiftly.
Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council. Councillor Magoon and then Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that committee recommend council direct administration to undertake an expression of interest EOI process that upholds the availability of golf in Hinton as a requisite component of the EOI. And if I could just speak to that for a moment, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
Yeah, I'm excited about this process. I know we've been talking about this coming before council. I think there's a real potential to see, what business models and possibilities are out there. Not just ensuring the sustainability of golf long-term in Hinton, but also, I think there's a real potential for expanding the economic development of that general area. So I'm excited to see what our private sector has out there and what they want to sort of show off with their ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we now have a request for, we have a motion before us. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll be supporting this motion when this comes to regular if passed by council. I'll probably have more questions around timeline, whether we use RFP processes or go a little bit beyond for expression of interest. I'm concerned about a 1-month process and ensuring that could collect some bigger proposals, maybe from outside of the community. If it's too short of a process and it's not advertised outside of the community, I wonder if we're selling ourselves short, both with maybe financials, but also overall experience in the community and what we're bringing. So I'll probably have a pile of questions at that time, but at this time, the motion's made and I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Questions? Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was speaking with a couple people about this report, and they wanted me to ask, when we say upholds the availability of golf in Hinton, are we talking about the full 18 holes? Or is people wanted to know if the integrity of the 18-hole concept was going to be maintained?
Give Councillor Wall over to CEO Administration, CEO Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to answer that, there wasn't too detailed of a fence around what that would mean. We're not sure what the interest is and wouldn't want to deter someone from coming forward with an option that included something of an alternative to the full 18-hole course. So at this time, availability of golf is a broad concept, but recognizing conversation that around the council table previously, it seemed something that council would want to get more information on through that process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Administration, Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to, speak to the fact that I will support this as well. I think it's a great opportunity for council to see what vested interest there is out there in our community, and whether it's in our community, outside of our community, to see what the future of that area might look like. Since acquiring this asset, I think it's important as council to have a look at, what we can do with that area, whether it's to keep as is or expand and look at other options. So I think this is the best way to start seeing what people's ideas are out there, which I think will then also help to answer some of those questions that those community members might have around, what way golf look like in the future as well. So excited through this process and hear from those parties and see what's out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, anything else? Okay, seeing nothing, we would call the direction request to question. That committee recommend council direct administration to undertake an expression of interest EOI process that upholds the availability of golf in Hinton as a requisite component of the EOI. Council, all those in favor? And that was carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Is there anything further on this matter before we move ahead? Okay, so no one, that brings us to our second action item for today, the COVID-19 Resilience Support Program Report, post funding. CA Olson.
Mr. Chair. This item is before Council tonight to support discussion on options for use of a surplus that was created by the receipt of the Municipal Operating Support Transfer, or MOST grant. The funds were used to offset the financial impacts of COVID-19 in 2020. It created a surplus of funds totaling $700,000, which were placed into the Emergency Operating Reserve during the 2021 budget process. Council's already determined some use of the funds to offset taxation for 2021 in the amount of $200,000, 2022 in the amount of $200,000, and in 2023 in the amount of $100,000. As well, approximately $30,000 was provided to the Chamber of Commerce to support the provision of tourist visitation services in 2021, and funds of an amount yet to be determined were earmarked for the reduction of recreation center fees, user fees, with a report to come to Council on May 4th with that financial information. The options of this report focus on supports to the local business community with information and input provided by the Chamber of Commerce in the development of this report. The intention here is to provide a variety of supports that will assist with the immediate and midterm needs of Hinton's businesses. The recommended action is to support a modified voucher program that local businesses can subscribe to that will provide funding for a menu of items such as immediate relief from taxes or utilities, funding for training or upskilling staff, materials to support the physical needs that COVID has required in order for them to operate. In addition, due to the interest in local businesses in the Travel Alberta Cooperative Marketing Program and the limited availability of intakes and funds through that program, a local cooperative marketing program can be considered to market our local offerings to the community, the region, and the province. The total use of the Emergency Operating Reserve for these two programs comes to $130,000, leaving enough funds for the Recreation Center fee reduction discussion to take place on May 4th. As well, should the program see oversubscription, another intake can be considered through the use of the additional year-end surplus identified in the year-end financial statements Council saw earlier this winter. A report on this that contemplates additional programming for the community as well as options for the surplus in the context of the town's year-to-date financial statements will be forthcoming in May. As well, for implementation, administration will provide a framework to support the direction provided by Council. Preliminary conversations have already taken place, but before we went too far down that road, we wanted to see what direction Council would provide and where we could best put our efforts to put that framework together quickly. This would require coming back to a special or regular Council meeting for a decision. And at this time, I'll turn things back over to Council.
Great, thank you, CA Olson. I have Councillor Hosson, Councillor Magoon, and Councillor Waugh.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you. I think this is exactly what this money was intended for. And I love the idea that it was quite flexible given to us to accommodate or to assist in the effects of COVID, and the same, is around this idea. There's a lot of different opportunities with this. I guess I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to start with one, and then I'll get back in the queue, Mr. Chair. Rent-wise, if some people were, say, struggling with rent, could that be also something potentially that could then apply for this funding as well? I don't believe that it was specifically listed, but I'm just curious if that's possible.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Administration, CA Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really up to the will of Council. It is possible for a modified voucher program, and the term modified is just that. A typical voucher program or a regular voucher program would provide that money after a receipt of the spending of the money on whatever was approved through the program. Then it's a reimbursement. We understand that there may be a need for some funds up front. It's really to Council's discretion. I'm not sure Mr. Kovach, Mr. Rousseau saw anything similar in other communities that they might be able to provide some advice or input on. But the menu in front of council is a starting point. It can be expanded, it could be shrunk. There are, I guess, impacts of each, but if that is something that council is interested in including, we welcome the discussion. Mr. Chair, Mr. Russo has turned his camera on. I'm not sure if he has something to add that would be supportive of this question.
Thank you, CEO Olson, through the chair to council. We haven't seen that the specific sort of catering to payment of rent has been accommodated. However, every community is unique and there are different struggles. And so I would say it's up to council's purview. We have a pot of money that's been allocated that you could extend it to that way. You could maybe get an oversubscription to that request, but then it will likely be on a first come, first served basis. But it doesn't preclude you from deciding to assist your business folks with that option. As you could see, CA Olson is also allowed for, maybe utilities payment if that's behind. I see very little between the two of a mortgage payment and utility. So I think it fits that capping of that area of your interest, councillor.
Okay. If I may follow up, Mr. Chair. The basis of my question lands to, we had this conversation, the share shop came forward and, they were struggling with rent. And we talked about how maybe the most money can assist in that area. So I'm just curious, and if it is up to us, that's fine. I just wasn't sure, from administration's point of view, whether or not that would fit the criteria potentially, or, and I appreciate the answer. It sounds like it can if we allow it to be. So at this time, it was not necessarily considered potentially in the beginning, but it could be at this point. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I can get back in the queue, that'd be great.
Yep, I've put you back in the queue. Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I had a fairly similar question. When I looked at the report, one of the things that jumped out at me, given the context of what's going on right now, was the concept of businesses expanding their offerings with patios and outdoor venues, in order to try and make up for some of that lost revenue. And so I guess my question then would be, at what point would council take a defining hand at looking at that menu and identifying what are some things that we feel that voucher system could go towards?
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Over to administration, CEO Wilson.
Mr. Chair, at any time, if there are items that council would like to discuss and include, I think having a good understanding of what is working for council, what supports your vision for a program such as this, it can be whatever it needs to be for the community and include the things that it needs to. And I think there was an example within the report of just that, the patio materials would be supported by a voucher program like that. And I mentioned just the need for additional materials for businesses in order to operate. So that could be, the plexi, it could be, PPE, it could be really anything that's required. That's a pretty broad category for use. So patio materials, barricades, planters, whatever could fit into that program under that. It's just the way that people will need to do business through this leg of the pandemic.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for admin. All the research that's been done with other communities and how they've implemented some of these programs, are there been any cases where there have been any criteria or guidelines in order to ensure that the money's going to businesses that absolutely need it, as opposed to just having it a wide open free for all? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Over to admin, CEO Wilson.
So I'll provide a partial answer, and then I'll look to Mr. Russo to kind of fill that in. In some community, and Mr. Kovach as well is on the line. In some communities, there was a threshold for number of employees. So a program such as this would apply to businesses with 40 or fewer employees. working for that business. As far as other, I guess, sets of criteria or considerations for the program, Mr. Rousseau, do you have anything to add to that, vein?
Thank you, CEO Olson, and to the council. I'd like to defer that to Mr. Kovac, please.
CEO Wilson, to the chair, on to council. In collecting the information from across the province, it was clear that the criteria was developed individually based on each different community. So some were very flexible, and some had only one requirement, so that there was actually no need for criteria. So I think at this point, where we're bringing this forward, it's truly up to the direction from council to provide administration to create that criteria.
Okay. Thank you, administration. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a respond to one of our community members. First of all, it isn't quite in line with conversations I've had with some business owners looking to recoup some of those costs, unexpected costs, whether it's accounting services or the PPE thing, considerations as well. So had some really good feedback from it. The one thing though, and the question I had, and they as well did, is just worried about is this process going to be cumbersome for administration? Is how are we going to manage the application that it's not overwhelming administration? So I guess if you could speak to a little bit of the details, potentially what administration's thoughts are if we were moving forward to, which I thought was very kind of the individual to reach out and to consider that as well, realizing everybody's working hard and not wanting to make more work for people. So if you could speak to the process and that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it I guess somewhat depends on what the direction council provides. If it's a modified voucher, there would have to be a database of who's applied and what they've received and what. So there's a framework that does need to be established, and it will take some admin support to create that. I think that there are ways to make it easily accessible and streamline that process. So it's not one person's phone that rings, but maybe there's an email address that's set up. We get the information from local businesses, and we can follow up if we have questions on what they're submitting. So some of these details we've yet to work out, but we're looking to make it as straightforward and reduce any red tape around this as much as possible, so that it's easy to use on both sides. So for the businesses that are seeking that support and for administration that's keeping track as well. So definitely some checks and balances there. But again, depending on what council's considering tonight, if it's a modified voucher program, if it's a full voucher program and you need to spend in order to get that reimbursement back, the list of options that council's looking to consider, or whether it's a dollar amount and there is no voucher and it's just provided, maybe it's a lower amount, but there's fewer components or criteria around the use. So there's some flexibility in what council's able to do, and administration would fit the framework to the decisions of council.
Great, thank you, CEO Wilson. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could ask a question, I probably have a follow-up question, but how many business licenses do we have in Hinton at this time?
Administration, is that something that you've got information on hand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe so. Mr. Kovac, is that a number that you have? I have an approximate, but I'm sure you have something closer.
CEO Olson, Mr. Chair, through to the council. I only have an approximate number. I believe it's between 600 and 650 registered businesses.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Mhm.
Yeah, with that in mind, this motion or recommendation, if the companies or businesses are taking the entire $1,000, that leaves room for 100 businesses to participate. And I have a few concerns about the first come, first serve kind of approach to it, and that I think what we will find is those businesses that have accountants on staff or on contract and we're the first people to take advantage of the initial $40,000 loan, and with 25% of it non-repayable. My concern is that those first 100 could be the ones that need it least, and would likely maximize that, because why wouldn't you? It's a smart business decision to maximize that. And I know I had some conversations about how we make sure that the businesses that need it most get it, and that's something between now and when this comes back, I'll have to at least personally reconcile and figure out. But I think just something for council to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Magoon.
I'm good to withdraw for right now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one quick question about the from administration's thoughts on it and what other communities might have done developing this with the two different voucher programs, which, by the way, I really appreciate the marketing as well. I think that's a good opportunity for partnerships to happen within our community and business community to market their businesses. I guess the question was when other communities may have had these voucher programs able to apply for both vouchers, whether it be for the support voucher and for the marketing, or was it one or the other? Just out of curiosity.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Olson.
Mr. Chair, so out of the communities that were reviewed, I don't believe any had two programs that were exactly the same as this, that ran alongside each other. So that is something that was open to council for decision, but as far as a recommendation, it would be considered open to both, to businesses for both. Again, depending on if there's any further criteria that's in place for the businesses to apply for the voucher program. Businesses that have reached out to economic development, Mr. Kovach, along the lines of the collaborative marketing program and the opportunity for the Travel Alberta collaborative marketing program. There's a number of businesses that were interested, and just due to the limited availability, was something that we wanted to bring forward for council's consideration as well.
Thank you, CEO Wilson. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Haas?
No, but I'll get back in the queue if I may, please.
Okay, Councillor Nelson.
Is looking at this as it's very much targeted towards business, and we worked with the Chamber of Commerce, and it's been brought up on this meeting already about nonprofits. Do we have any money set aside for nonprofit support as we move forward? I think maybe when we were looking at this originally, we thought it might encompass nonprofits, but I don't read it that way.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Administration, Stephen Wilson.
Mr. Chair, so the community grant program is really the program that was catered more to nonprofits. Something that will be for council's consideration when that item comes back around for decision is to allow for operating costs to be included. I know right now under the guidelines for the program, that isn't permitted outside of the first couple of years, 3 years, I think, of a business, but that's something that administration is looking at and will bring options for council's consideration to allow for that through the community grant program for this year only.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Nelson?
Just a quick comment. I appreciate that. Likely our nonprofits aren't looking on taking on a huge amount of new initiatives at this exact moment. So looking at building some flexibility into the grant program to allow for some expenditures on operational, I think likely solves that. And with the 60 grand we've allocated to that, hopefully we can provide what's needed for nonprofits. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson, Councillor Haas, and then Magoon, and then Mayor Michaels.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate those CEO's expression about the community grant. I think this is a great opportunity for pivoting at this year alone for operational. So thank you. I guess the question I have is just a bit of a process question, because we've talked a lot about criteria, and I guess I'm looking for, if we do direct this evening to say go forward with this, when would and then brought to a regular for a motion, but when would the criteria be established? Is that something that we're looking at doing, getting some ideas this evening with the discussion of council, or is that something that would come later once we've earmarked or potentially earmarked, a certain amount of dollars or budgeted for this? So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. CEO Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So definitely looking if there's any ideas or concerns, I guess, that administration can take a look into providing some solutions to when this comes back around for decision. Already there's been a couple that have brought forward that we can take a look into how others are administering their programs, and if there's anything further. I would also look at this point, Mr. Kovach, if there was anything that you encountered outside of the number of employees criteria for businesses, if there's anything else. I know some of the voucher programs that were reviewed were more stringent in what the vouchers could be used for, and they were more for training for those materials. They weren't used for taxes, utilities, rent, and those kinds of things. So that was another way to, I guess, lower the subscription and look at the more midterm impacts of the use of that money through training and that sort of thing. But Mr. Kovach, was there anything else that you came across that you could touch on for us?
CEO Olson, through to the chair and council, really, because of the programs being so very specific in nature, a lot of them weren't laden with a lot of criteria. And one thing I would add when it comes to the administration and criteria piece that should be aware that in other communities, depending on what the relationship was with other service organizations, there were contractual relationships specifically in Leduc and Wetaskiwin, where although the grants were provided by the municipalities, they were actually administered through contract by the Chamber of Commerce. Just as an idea to put some context around how it's administered as well. I didn't have an opportunity to respond to that earlier, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you, administration. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess my question is really more for council. I'm wondering, what council's feel is for taking that $1,000 starting point for a grant and maybe moving it more towards the area of $750 or $500, and essentially just trying to stretch that dollar a little bit and get it out to more businesses. Yeah, I'll just leave it there and see what council thinks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. First one, is there any ability for this to be retroactive? So hypothetically, if this comes for approval and the program starts on date X and somebody already spent $850 on patio equipment or plexiglass, could they submit that, or is the intent for this to commence and any purchases would follow the date of installment?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Administration, CEO Olson.
Mr. Chair. So that hasn't been discussed, I think, through administration availability of retroactive application to items that were maybe purchased or undertaken. I think we'd have to be careful at how far back we would allow something like that. I think the intention is kind of and what we were looking at in preparing the report was for this to start and then be applied on a go forward basis. If that is a concern, that's something we could look at. It may just add an extra consideration on the framework for application.
And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Thank you. I guess the other question, and I apologize if I'm misinterpreting this. It sounds like council from a high level, will look to approve this program. It would come back to regular, we would approve, and then the details of the program would be constructed by administration, which would take a week or so, and then that would be communicated to the public. Is that sort of a fair understanding?
Mayor Michaels, CEO Olson.
I think that is a fair understanding. So this would come to council. We're looking to, I guess, to expand on this just a little bit. There are as many programs as there are communities, and the sky's kind of the limit as to what council can consider. We tried to provide some options in this report to build what is right for Hinton. So through this conversation, some amendments to the report will come forward. We fine tune what this looks like and work on our framework kind of at the same time. So bring to council for decision. And then, as you said, take a little bit of time, a week or so, to put the pieces in place, start an advertising or communications plan to let eligible businesses know what the options are to move forward. So we're definitely not looking to take a month or two to get this in place. We're looking to move forward as quickly as possible, which is why we wanted to bring the report forward tonight, so that we could get a sense of where council's interests are for this, and then we can dial it in and bring it back for approval.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, I just have a comment. I don't have a question. My mindset is, do we try to coordinate this as a council for the actual framework to come back and see, share this with the community and maybe tweak it at another meeting? Because I like where this is going. I think there's some questions on how much, how little, what fits, what doesn't fit. So do we want to maybe time this with that framework in the month of May? And then deliver something, that maybe we might be overlooking or not looking at all. So that's my only concern with this. I like it in principle. I look to support this, but now the framework I think will be an important piece, and more we can expose that to businesses to get their feedback and build it together, I think sets us up for success. So that's my only concern is that framework, because then we can lay out everything. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the question by Mayor Michaels about the retroactive, because one of the things I guess comes to mind, and that was the conversation I was having with some businesses, is that, some of the businesses may or may not have applied for some or even was successful, in particular some accounting and also the, with regards to, I was just reading here, the materials to adapt to change COVID-19 restrictions. And I guess my only concern of not being retroactive, to say accounting, that maybe have already been done, the bills are already in and maybe haven't received any funding for that. This is an opportunity to get some of that funding back. And I look at, for example, materials to adapt to changing COVID-19. So I guess part of my thought process is a lot of that work has been done, whether it be the plexiglass and things like that. And I heard that brought up, here. So I guess that would be one thing that I would, as long as they haven't received already funding for it, through another, whether it's provincial grants or any other grants potentially, I would like to see some of the businesses be able to recoup some of those costs rather than just moving forward to what comes next, because some of them might be just struggling trying to, pay those bills. So those are the only thing. That was one thing that I come to mind with that question, and I guess I had in my own mind that this, because most money we did receive in, I believe it was at the beginning of the year, CEO Olson, or it was into last year. We just haven't talked about where that most money was going to go at that point yet. So we had this money in our bank, prior, to when these things were happening for them. So that's the only thoughts that I had in regards to the retroactive potential there. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to speak to the mayor's comment first about retroactive, I think going back to really our second outbreak is a reasonable time frame, because we've seen since A lot of our businesses more recently have shut down again. You know, they're trying to adapt and they're in the middle of that. Unfortunately, I feel like we're sort of catching up with that, trying to deal with policy. So I certainly would be supportive of looking at a retroactive piece. I also agree with the mayor that we do need to take some time to engage with the public and to seek out our business community and get their input on the program, the framework that does come forward prior to it being at a regular council meeting. Now, in order to accommodate that, it's very possible for council to call a special meeting, because I do think that this is something that should get passed sooner than later, understanding the immense financial pressures that are being faced by our small business community right now. And then just last but not least, to speak to the menu options that are available through this sort of program, I'd like to see it as, almost as open as possible. This is a program that I think we do want our business community to be able to take advantage of. And so we need to consider that when we're looking at that framework moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Just before I go to Councillor Waugh, there's some, good thoughts, good observations, but I just want to remind council, if there is anything specific we want to do, probably the best way to go about it is to furnish a direction. We can discuss, debate the specific direction, and then make a decision on that. Direct administration, whether to move ahead with something or not, and then maybe move on to the next thing and try and keep things moving forward. With that, I'll go to Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's funny, after you provide that guidance, I'm worried I might throw this conversation a little bit on its head. And the reason being that we haven't had a chance to talk about this philosophically before. So I want to put it out there. I know that there's been an appetite expressed to get this money out there as soon as possible to help some businesses that are struggling. I'm kind of looking ahead, and philosophically speaking, is this 100,000 better served not so much as a relief program, but as a recovery program? And I'm looking to the end of the summer or the fall, when federal programs are set to stop, provincial programs are set to stop. Some of these relief programs are scheduled to come to an end then. From a local perspective, can we set this money up potentially to be a longer runway for some of the businesses that are need a little bit more time to adapt to the post-COVID world? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to respond to Councillor Waugh's thoughts, I understand, and to a certain degree, I agree. But I think part of the problem is that businesses right now, from what I'm seeing, especially our restaurants, they're struggling to develop a bit of their own recovery program by expanding their normal business, out into the street. And, that's sort of the reality that they're dealing with right now. So I guess I would be concerned that while they're trying to just make things happen and take on and incur extra costs over the next month, if this takes too long, it's not really going to do them any good if they're struggling to survive in an industry right now. If we tell them, well, we have a recovery program that's slated more for the fall, that would be my worry. You know what I mean? It's just, I'd like to see some of those more vulnerable businesses get the funding they need sooner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Waugh.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Magoon in that there are some sectors, some business sectors that definitely need some immediate relief. And I would be all behind an immediate program that provides immediate relief. Again, my big criteria is need. I would want to have some way to show need. So whether we put in a criteria about businesses that have been forced to shut doors, businesses that have been forced to limit operations in some way, and make sure they're prioritized over other businesses that the impact hasn't been nearly as direct, then I would more happily get behind that if that's part of the criteria that come forward. But again, I just wanted to ask the philosophical question about where our money is best put to use. Thank you.
Great, appreciate the comments, Councillor Watt, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess just to build on Councillor Wall's comments, because I agree with what he had said, certainly. Administration, have we seen in other communities any kind of framework or model, rubric, if you will, that's being used to establish need for some businesses and sectors, given the context of what's going on right now?
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. CA Olson.
Mr. Chair. So I don't believe we have. That was a question I did pose to Mr. Kovach a little bit earlier, Mr. Rousseau, whether they had seen any kind of criteria outside of that, you know, a threshold of number of employees, or just the criteria of the, you know, what the program's applicable to for businesses. Some of the programs are constrained by training, that this is for training, this is for upgrading, upskilling, that sort of thing, or reskilling. I don't believe we've seen anything to address the you know, the need piece. That's something that we can look at and see if we can even create if it doesn't exist anywhere else, that we can copy from or use some of their templates for language. Something that we could develop ourselves if this is something that's of concern to council that needs addressing before moving forward.
Councillor Magoon, did you want to follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and really more so to the rest of council, and I haven't settled on this, but then maybe an option to sort of take into what the mayor had been talking about earlier as well, and Councillor Waugh's comments. Then maybe, you know, one of our opportunities moving forward that we could jump on is work with some of our colleagues in the business community to establish, you know, what are these critical factors? What are these red flags, as it were, for businesses in different sectors that would highlight them as being more, you know, a business that's in more need than, say, another. I don't know, perhaps we need to do a really quick working group to sort of hammer out some of these details. But anyway, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do really appreciate Councillor Waugh's approach to this, and I know he prefaced it with maybe going sideways, or I forget what term he used, but I like it. I think there's an opportunity, and it depends really on the will of council for how much funds we want to allocate. But I think I have the same train of thought. I would love to allocate X amount of dollars. Let's say there was $100,000 in a community recovery plan where we put forward a committee like we do with the community grant, and people have to put in their applications for a larger sum, let's say $3,000 to $5,000. And we award 20, 25 businesses who need it the most on merit that is vetted through a committee process. That would take 2-3 months to deliver, but that can be in conjunction with this. We're going to have to take, if we choose to go down this path, we're going to have to take some risk. We know people will apply for this who will not need it as much as others. It's really difficult to put the proper oversight in order to, you know, put forward a $130,000 project at $1,000 maximum. But I think there's room for both. So maybe the question is, if we want both, is $130,000 the right amount for this? If so, let's move forward with something that we can deliver in the next 4 weeks to the community, and let's put the wheels in motion, because I would strongly support that. A committee-based approach on merit for another $100,000 to help out those businesses hit the hardest in our community. So that's my train of thought. I'm okay with changing the amount of money from this one in order to support that too. If there's a concern with too much money going to this, for myself, I think it's money well spent. So for the sake of moving forward, I'd like to move this forward, but I'm also open to a secondary program to deal with the other pressing issue, which is the businesses who have suffered the absolute most. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council, I have Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction that committee recommends that council approve a COVID-19 resilience support program of $100,000 for a local business goods and services voucher program.
Okay, did you want to speak to it, Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, there are a couple of language things. So a program, I think, is more important than the program. And wherever we go from it right now, if there's other directions, I think it makes sense to give some directions if people want to, but I think we have to ultimately approve whether we're going to do it first before making sub-directions underneath it. I have a lot of questions, and I'm feeling less comfortable with the collaborative marketing piece, largely because there's very little in the report and I have lots of questions. But so I've left that out of this discussion and really just focused on the kind of support vouchers in this direction. So other than that, I think no matter what we do with this, it's going to be learning on the fly. I don't want to try to get it right because we're not going to. I think we need to get it as good as we can get it. Try to put enough parameters around so that we get it 75-80% correct and quick. Because if we get it perfect, it's going to take us 6 months and it's still not going to be right. And it's probably going to be too late. So I appreciate everybody's comments. And I think we're largely on the same page with all of it. It's just a matter of how we get from here to there. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. I appreciate the motion to get things moving forward. So, Council, we have a motion before us that'll give us the opportunity to decide if there's a will to even move forward with a program like this. If it passes, then there's all the opportunity for Council to go ahead and fine tune it and give additional direction to administration once this is decided on. So for the time being, as there's a direction request before us, we'll keep comments, questions to that. And I'd look to Council to see if there is anything. All right, seeing nothing from Council, we'd call these direction request to question. That committee recommend Council approve a COVID-19 resilience support program of $100,000 for a local business goods and services voucher program. And we just need to note that that was moved by Councillor Nelson. Council, all those in favor? Okay, and that was carried. Excellent, thank you, Council. Okay, is there any additional direction that we want to give administration on what we want to see come out of that initial one? Council. Councilor Magoon, and then Mayor Michaels.
Yeah, actually, my question was for the mayor, so hopefully this is something he was looking at tackling. Mr. Mayor, did you have a particular time period that you were looking at in terms of your retroactive fees? Because that's something I know I would like to support.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. To Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was focused on the framework first, sort of based on that previous motion passed. That's where my mind was. So I'd like to put forward a direction regarding the framework, but I did have a question for administration first, if that's okay.
Okay, Councillor Magoon, since you have the floor, is that okay? Okay, carry on, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question to administration, how soon could we see a draft framework of this program?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. To administration, Celia Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the draft framework would entail the eligibility criteria, the scope of the program. It's something that could be put together fairly swiftly as well. Conversations through administration on how it will be administered. That likely wouldn't be part of the framework itself, but the application instructions would be. So having that kind of piece together, then that would form the communications plan that goes out. So it's something, I'd really be guessing to determine a time frame, but it would take a week or two, I think, to get all of those things in place. So what could happen is that the criteria for the program could come to council for approval, and the framework kind of, as far as it got in behind for administrative processes, and we bring that forward to council for approval before finishing it up and going out to the public with it. Was there a certain component of the framework that you were looking to expedite that we could speak to or provide some assurances to?
Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm more concerned with like what falls within the actual tangible items like the plexiglass, the patios, sort of a list. So my what do you call it? Expectations would be somewhat medium, not very high for the draft, knowing that I'm trying to work out the time frame. This would be coming to council more than likely May 4th. That gives 14 days. Could we see a draft on May 4th? The only reason I'm okay with bringing it or suggesting to bring it May 11th, but then our next regular isn't till the month later. Although I guess we can call a special meeting. I'm trying to approve the program while at least getting high level understanding of the specifics within the draft. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I kind of want them in conjunction, unless it would defeat the purpose. I want to get the public input on approving this with what the criteria might be. So,
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. CEO Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's all right with the chair and with council, if we could call a short, just a couple of minute break, we'll just put our heads together and I can confirm some of that. There's also one other piece that I just wanted to chat with our administration on. If a 5-minute break is amenable to council, that could give us a couple of minutes to answer that question a little bit more directly.
Okay, thank you for that, CEO Olson. I'll call a.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'd like to reconvene our standing committee meeting and turn it over to CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just I appreciate the opportunity to run down the hall and chat with my colleagues for a minute, just to provide a little bit more information in response to Mayor Michael's question. I think that as far as the criteria for the program, council can land tonight on a few broad categories in order to move this forward. There can be some, I guess, discretion applied by administration as the program would run. So the broad categories could include things like the materials for doing business during COVID. So could include the patio items, some of the PPE materials. Another category could be training and any kind of upgrading or training opportunities that businesses might want to send their employees to or take themselves. And then as well, something to provide some immediate relief for bills. So the utilities, taxes, rent, that component. As well, and that could be turned around really quickly. If we could get those broad categories and a few examples of each, it might just, enable us to move forward through this a little bit more quickly. If we have kind of the scope of what council's considering. The other piece that administration chatted about just briefly is setting the criteria for eligibility and how it's a little bit difficult to do with setting some sort of a threshold or target for support to local businesses that are struggling, especially if it's a financial criteria. That's maybe difficult for businesses to share confidentially exactly what their position is. There could be an opportunity to create a separate application for a portion of those funds that aren't within the full voucher program, similar to what Mayor Michaels was describing, where there's a separate application that's confidential, and we could determine what that would look like. And then that would come to maybe a couple of folks on council or administration to look at it, to support something either at the top end of what's approved through the voucher program or slightly greater even. So just a little bit of additional information. The piece that I wanted to touch on mostly was for the criteria of the program, a way to kind of streamline that conversation for council if there's some broad categories that we can consider that might help, I guess, the process.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Mayor Michaels, does that adequately address the information you're looking for?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it does. I'm just trying to formulate where to go from here. So at the moment, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction that the COVID support program be open initially to businesses with no fewer than 2 employees and no more than 40 employees, with it being expanded to include any business.
Second, please.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Expanded to include any business after 60 days. And if I could speak to it, I'm highly amenable to those numbers. I look at the types of businesses that we probably want to target first. I don't think it's the major corporations. I don't know if $1,000 to those businesses would really have an impact on their day to day. Also, I'm not certain that a home-based business that has not any employees to pay, not a lot of overhead, I'm not sure that's who we should target first. Although I'd be amenable to change that to remove that part and have it be just one. And I think if it's opened up to that, then opened up beyond that after 60 days, we should have a decent idea of what the uptake would be. And again, this is really just to get a motion on the floor to see where council goes. So thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Nelson. Council, we have a direction request. So if we could keep comments, questions to that for the time being. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like most of it, and Councillor Nelson already spoke to maybe part of it. Where I have concerns is if you have a bricks and mortar place and you're one employee, to be not eligible for this is challenging. That's the only thing I'd want to be changed. So I'm looking at how we can change that. Otherwise, I support the premise of it. Other communities have demonstrated that they've excluded the homeowner business for not having that overhead. So the way it's worded now, I wouldn't support it, and I'll look to potentially add a amendment to this in a moment. I just wanted to share my thoughts with council. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council. Councillor McGowan.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask to see the motion on the floor again, because I feel very much the same way as the mayor. I'd like to see if there's any way to include an amendment like that.
All right, council, are we good? Enough time to look at it? Okay. Council, is there anything, any amendments or anything we'd like to do with this before we call to question? Councilor Nelson?
If council is more comfortable with it being just no more than 40, I'm totally amenable to that. So if that's a desire from any member of council, I'd happily remove the no fewer than.
Sorry, Councilor McGowan, did I see your hand? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I would like to propose an amendment, hopefully a friendly amendment if Councillor Nelson sees it that way. I'd like to add after the no more than 2, Wendy, section. And I will just have to, again, forgive me, there's a little bit of editing on the fly here. Unless the business in question maintains a physical place of business separate from their residence. And if I could just speak to that, Mr. Chair. And again, I'm very open to any thoughts with council. Yeah, I agree with the mayor. If we do have that, and Councilor Nelson mentioned this, if we do have that overhead that is being taken on by a small business, I'd like to see them have the same sort of crack at it as other businesses. But again, like you had mentioned, if they're not operating out of a business storefront, low overhead, then I think it speaks for itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Before I go to council, I'll ask Councillor Nelson if that's an amendment that he would accept as friendly, or if he'd like to let his direction request stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that consideration. Would happily accept it as a friendly amendment. And I think moving forward, if there's a lot of communication with the public and something we're missing, we have time to amend that again when it comes to regular. So thanks for everybody's input.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Councillor Magoon and Councillor Nelson. Ms. Anderson, if we could just see it again with the friendly amendment added, just so we can make sure that we understand what it's saying. Okay, Councillor Magoon, Councillor Nelson, does that capture the intent of what you guys are looking for?
Yes, and I'm looking forward to the verbiage being much nicer when administration is done with it.
Okay, council, comments or questions, discussion? All right, so nothing we would, oh, Councillor Waugh, last second.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I was looking at the wording of the recommendation, and I just wanted to make sure it was clear what our vision is for this program. Is this going to be a first come, first serve, or is this going to be like an intake, like the community grant program? Because again, I just want to make sure that we're designing this program to make sure that the people that need it the most get access to it, regardless of when they have the capacity to make the application. And based on the wording of Councillor Nelson's recommendation, it seems to suggest that it's more of a first come, first serve within 30, 60 days. So I just wanted to have that conversation before I voted on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I think within that first 60 days, there's lots of other work that we could do and start to kind of funnel it down a little bit more through different motions or different directions, or even, sending administration away with some directions on the best way to ensure. I think there's work we can do within it to try to get it there. And I understand where you're coming from, and I struggle with the same things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council. Okay, seeing no further comments or questions, we'd like to call the direction into question that the COVID-19 support program be open initially to businesses with no fewer than 2 employees, unless the business in question maintains a physical place of business separate from their residence, and no more than 40 employees, with it being expanded to include any business after 60 days. Council, all those in favor? And that was carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Councillor Magoon.
Just a point of information to administration. CA Olson, you had mentioned a lot of points that I myself would like to see interpreted by the framework document. Things like patio furniture, plexiglass shields, that sort of thing. I just wanted to clarify, based on your earlier comments, do you see those already encompassed by the proposal in front of us? Otherwise, I'm looking to find out how we need to capture each individual finer point.
Thank you for that, Councillor Magoon. Over to administration, CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm searching for the wording within the report. I believe that it is under support approved physical improvements or what is needed to accommodate COVID-19 restrictions that impact businesses. To me, that language is one of those broad categories that can include PPE or the glass shields, temporary pieces to support patio outside for restaurants. I think it could encompass a lot within that language.
Thank you to administration. We'll go to Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's more of a comment on where I guess we want to go as a council tonight. Hopefully we could, if there's more direction in specifics, great. If not, my only concern still is whether if this is approved on, let's say, May 4th, will we entertain on May 4th new additions, right? That becomes a more challenging conversation at a regular meeting to add stuff. Sort of in going through this, and I appreciate CEO Olson's time out there to sort of get us some information. Do we want to just see the framework as an information item after it's been released to see if we want to make any changes after? I don't want to get into the weeds. I don't want to, but I do want to get this right and have an opportunity to not have a long meeting on May 4th if we're going to continue adding stuff to this, because maybe we'll leave today thinking it's great. That's my only concern. So my mind is still stuck. Do we want to publicly see this framework, get feedback from the community, and potentially suggest changes? That's my only thought. I'm kind of steered away now from wanting to give direction to bring this together. I have no problem approving just the program itself. So I just wanted to share my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. We'll go to Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction that the COVID support program
Just 1 second, I'm gonna share.
excludes rent and wages. And if I could speak to it, both rent and wages are things that have been subsidized through different programs. And I think that layer could add some challenges, especially administratively, because likely you'd have to prove that you haven't received subsidies for those rent programs or those wages. I think our role is to, as much as we can, cover off things that aren't readily covered by other grants, which a lot of the other things have been talked about, whether it's PPE or patio stuff. I think that's the place where the playground we're best to play in. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, we have a direction request. I'd speak to it quickly. I'm in support of this. I think there's some pretty large inherent challenges in opening up the program to the extent that it covers rent and wages and mortgage payments, and without any type of a structure to be able to assess it on a needs-based perspective. I think that would be really, really difficult to administer fairly. So for the time being, I'd like to see it stick to actual support for costs that businesses came up against, specifically in dealing with COVID, not to cover expenses that they would have had regardless of COVID or not. That said, though, I think if there is an opportunity down the road, as Mayor Michaels suggested earlier, to maybe look at a COVID recovery program, that maybe something like this might fit better in the longer term, where there can be some kind of a needs-based assessment that's put on it. Thank you. Council, is there anything else? Any comment, discussion, debate? Okay, not seeing anyone else who'd like to speak to it. I'd like to call the question. that the COVID-19 support program excludes rent and wages. And just quickly before I call that question to administration, does that give enough clarity on what's excluded, or to CA Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So rent and wages would be excluded. You'd mentioned other costs associated with operating that a business would have outside of COVID. That would include utilities and taxes. That comes to mind, something that we identified in here for council's consideration. But if the motion stands, it would be rent and wages, or I guess rent, including I mentioned as well mortgages. It would just be rent and wages. That's all that's included in that motion.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, CA Olson. My apologies for maybe calling that question a little bit prematurely then without seeking clarification first. Speaking just for myself, I would like to see that broadened somewhat so that it's not covering any of the regular expenses that business may incur, and that it's held specifically to COVID expenses. And I'm not sure how to capture that, and I'm not sure if that's something that Councillor Nelson would even want to consider in his motion. But I personally would like to see it a little bit broader. So I'm going to take the direction request off the. I'm going to take it off for voting at this time, and we'll open the floor back up to council for some further discussion on it. Councillor Nelson.
I guess whether it's rent or mortgage to me are one and the same, and so if it needs to be amended to include that, from what I've heard from council, I do think council had an appetite to include things like utilities, potentially, especially for businesses that were forced to close but still have those fixed costs and no income to cover those off. And I don't believe there are other subsidy programs that cover utilities. So I don't actually have at this time a burning issue with utilities. I'd rather see the dollar stay in our community, and utilities largely doesn't, but I'm okay with utilities at this point. But a rent or mortgage, I think, would be a more fair way of putting what the intention was.
Okay, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then I'd like to propose an amendment that the motion on the floor reflect rent and mortgages.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Nelson, I assume you're okay with that as a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I'm highly amenable. Thank you.
Okay. Council, is there anything further? Okay. I'll speak quickly to it before I call the question. I'm likely going to support it, even though I do still have a little bit of concern about the ability to be able to use it for covering a portion of town taxes or utilities, and the concern that without a needs assessment, and it's just first in line, that there's perhaps businesses who may not really need the support, who get in line and get it anyways. And you know, having said that, I just said I thought I was going to support it, but I actually don't think that I will. I appreciate the premise and the concept of it, and I like it a lot, but I do have concerns that, you know, some businesses that had some real concrete additional expenses that they had to cover to be able to stay open may not get the opportunity to get reimbursed for those expenses, because they might get line cut by some businesses who are looking to not pay a portion of their taxes or not pay some of the utilities by reimbursement. So yeah, unfortunately, as much as I like the concept of it, I don't think that I'm not going to be able to support the motion as it's currently worded. Thank you. Sorry, I saw some hands there. If I could just, Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I think there's nothing saying we can't make another motion to exclude more things or include other things. So I don't think supporting this motion would preclude a motion to exclude utilities or taxes and all those other things. I wanted to put one up that I thought council would support. And if they support that, we can always add another motion specific to utilities or other things and see where that goes. I didn't want to include too many different factors within one motion, and that it just might end splitting and make this a longer process. So yeah, I think it could be supported and more things could be added to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Nelson. Council? Okay, seeing no one further, we call the direction request question. That the COVID-19 support program excludes rent or mortgage and wages. Council? All those in favor? Opposed? And that was carried 5-1. Councillor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that committee, oh, sorry, Wendy, I'll make sure you're good. Oh. That committee direct administration to include retroactive support for the COVID-19 Resilience Support Program to, oh, no, there's a date attached, to April 1st, 2021. And just speaking to that, Mr. Chair, I'm actually fairly flexible on the date. I did try to pick something a little bit more recently, but would impact a number of our businesses who've been impacted by the more recent shutdowns, you know, primarily our food service industries, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'll just throw that out there and see what the rest of council thinks.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a direction request. Comments, questions, discussion? Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be speaking in support of this. I like the idea of a limited retroactive date to the most recent shutdown. It may help focus the support we give to those businesses that are most affected recently, as opposed to some sort of sweeping voucher program that goes back indefinitely. So I like that date. I think it's retroactive to the most recent situation we're in, and I can get behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Council? Okay, seeing no one who wishes to speak, call to question the direction that committee direct administration to include retroactive support for the COVID-19 resilience program, resilience support program to April 1st, 2021. Council? All those in favor? Opposed? And that was carried 5-1. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for administration regarding the utility and tax support that may be considered by administration in this framework. Any high-level background info on criteria or oversight or anything pertaining to that, because I do share the same concerns as Councillor Stashik and perhaps others about utilities and taxes. You could just literally, my concern is, hey, I'm just going to try to get $1,000 off of utilities just because. Any insight on how administration would speak to those two?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. To administration, CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as far as oversight, it is difficult, I suppose, for some of the larger uses of the program. We'd indicated that that's the voucher portion that would come through. So, you know, if it's some sort of proof or a bill or for other items that are more tangible in nature, a receipt of the purchase of those, but some funds provided up front. I think what administration was looking to do here is just provide some flexibility. We weren't really sure what council was hearing as far as the concerns of the business community and what they might wish to use this for, and come at this at first as broad as possible with the different considerations that council could decide upon. So there's with some of this stuff, there is a little bit of not an honor system, but some trust in the business community that those that are in dire straits that are looking to use that for utilities or tax relief, that they would be coming forward because they didn't need it. It's really, I suppose, with everything, that trust in the community, that the physical supports are needed, that the training and those opportunities are something that can be capitalized on. So as far as I guess a framework to determine proof, I don't know that I have an answer for that. It was really just intended to be flexible and to support a discussion with council. If that is a concern, that's something that we can look into if council wanted to continue to include those items. I don't know that we've seen too many programs that have that included in what they've done in other communities. I'm not sure Mr. Kovach or Mr. Rousseau has seen something. Again, just putting forward a menu to council for their consideration and to prompt some discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Russo, did you want to? Yeah.
Thank you, CEO Olson, through the chair to council. I don't have anything to add to that, but it's definitely something that we will look into deeper now that we understand we've had a really good, robust discussion. So I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, administration. Mayor Michaels, is that enough information for now? Okay, thank you. Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, in my opinion, with businesses, if they have access to the equivalent of a grant fund or something in addition to the normal, I think a lot of them will take advantage of that to do something different or new, rather than utilizing it for things like utilities and taxes. No different than at a household level. If we get a $400 check from the government, it's unlikely that we put that directly onto our mortgage. But if we do put it directly onto our mortgage, it's because we really need to. So I think just the way people are wired is likely to have the funds go to initiatives more so than things like utilities and taxes, except in the cases where they really need to use it for that, because if they don't, they're going to miss it and potentially dissolve. So I think I'm comfortable. I'm looking forward to seeing what we learn through this process and what people use it for, and really curious, but I don't have a major hang up at this time with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to seek a direction. That committee direct administration to cap the grant amount for the COVID-19 resilience support program at a total of $750 per business. And then if I could just speak to that briefly, Mr. Chair. Really, by knocking it down $250 per business, we have the ability to extend our reach to an additional 50 businesses. I certainly believe this is a program that is going to be well subscribed to. And so in this instance, I think $750 still matters quite a lot to those businesses who receive this, but it'll also matter more to those extra 50 businesses who will be able to apply and hopefully get this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. To Council, Councilor Nelson.
I'll support this. If this is undersubscribed, there's nothing saying we can't go back and use some of that other monies to open up further or allow a second intake of $250 or $500 to businesses who have already applied. So with that in mind, I like the idea of reach, and I'll be in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council? Okay, seeing no one else who'd like to speak to it, we'd call to question that committee direct administration to cap the grant amount for the COVID-19 Resilience Support Program at a total of $750 per business. Council, all those in favor? All opposed? And that was carried 5-1. Council, anything further? Councillor Nelson?
Like to make a direction that the COVID support program be limited to businesses that were operating at any point in 2019 and maintained a business license through 2020 and 2021. If I could speak to it, if there's anything with the mechanics of that motion that doesn't work for administration, again, I'm highly amenable, but the idea of it is that we're supporting businesses that were in place and then through COVID had to change their business and adapt. If a brand new business is opened in the middle of COVID, it's likely because there's been opportunity or lower rents or different things that they've taken into account when they opened their business. COVID has not impacted businesses in any sort of a fair manner. It's been pretty arbitrary. But again, looking at limiting the scope of who's eligible, I think those that were in business before COVID and had to adapt is likely the best use of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, we have a direction request. Councillor Law?
Yeah, I support the premise of this. I thought Councillor Nelson did a pretty good job explaining it, and I like the fact that they had to have had a business license in place to receive these funds. The one thing I would say is about in operation in 2019, there might have been sub businesses that started up in January and February 2020 without fully realizing what the impacts of COVID might be. So I was wondering if you'd be amenable to changing the date to prior to March 2020.
I would be highly amenable to that. Thank you.
Okay. We can make that change in Councillor Nelson's direction request. Council, is there anything further? Councillor Magoon?
I don't think I can support the direction at the time. It sound for myself, it's logical, it makes sense. But what I'm worried about is that there's details of newer businesses and their business model that I just don't know enough about to sort of, I feel like I'm almost prejudging them by supporting a motion like this. So again, I'd need to know more information. I'm just uncomfortable at this point without knowing the full context of the impact it could have on newer businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council. Okay, seeing no one else who'd like to speak to the direction request, we would call to question that the COVID-19 support program be limited to businesses that were operating at any point prior to March 2020 and maintained a business license through 2020 and 2021. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That was carried 5-1. Council, anything further? Okay. Oh, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess a question just in order to help administration get confirmation. Do we want to officially pass this at next week's special meeting? I know there was no specific date, But I think, unless I'm wrong, the sooner that we officially pass this, quicker administration can work on that framework. And if not, then I apologize. Disregard what I'm saying, but is there any benefit in passing this next Tuesday? Administration.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. To administration, CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Mayor Michaels. With the number of changes, it might be challenging to get that in place to join the agenda package for the end of the week. It would be possible to bring it for May 4th with those changes included. If it was a priority to get it in front of council and approved as an emerging item to add to that special meeting, administration could do our best to get that ready. We would prefer a little additional time though to May 4th, just to ensure that we're not rushing through the changes and that it meets the direction that council set out tonight.
Perfect. Then I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councilor Nelson.
The only other question I had is, do we have an end date in mind for this program, or are we just thinking it operates until it's exhausted? And I don't know that we have to determine that now, but just within that next report or within the parameters itself, I think, understanding how long this is planned to go for is important.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. To administration, CEO Wilson.
Mr. Chair, the intention was to put the program forward, understanding that there will be interest in it and having it in place until the funds run out, I guess, and then at which point council could make a determination whether they want to, I guess, determine a way to continue the program through the additional surplus funds, or whether this is the end of it, I guess, as the funds run out. Through good communication with council and updates through the program, that could be an ongoing discussion with council, bringing that information about subscription, where things are sitting, and how quickly we're moving through the available funds to ensure council has an idea of how successful the program is. So administration is comfortable leaving it open that way. If council wishes to have an end date, we're open to suggestions. It could end by the end of this year, it could end by the fall. It's an arbitrary date. I wouldn't know any reasoning to support one date over another.
Thank you for that, CEO Olson. If I could ask a clarifying question then. I don't intend to just recover ground that's already been covered, but would there not be some benefit to having a defined end date in the event that the program is undersubscribed? Council knows when the end date is and could take the opportunity at that point to utilize that most funding to carry forward some other initiatives rather than leaving it open indeterminately. I know myself, I would prefer that it had an end date. Because at that point a decision can be made on what to do with the rest of the funding if there is any available. I guess that's over to administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, an end date could be put in place with that explanation of the reasoning why an end date would be considered by council in order to utilize the most money for a different initiative. I would suggest the end of August for an end date. Would give enough time for the community to utilize the program and still allow likely a full quarter to utilize that money on other things in the fall. But again, that's whatever council's comfortable for their reasoning for choosing an end date, that's different than that. Administration's open to including whatever council is comfortable with.
Well, thank you, CEO Olson. I appreciate that clarity. With that, if there's anyone on council who would like to make a direction along those lines, that would be fine. If not, I would turn the chair over. Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to move that the COVID support program have an end date of October 31st, 2021. And if I could speak to it, as long as that gives options for starting a conversation on where it is going to go or extending if necessary, and if there's a better way to capture that, then fine. Otherwise, I do think there is a benefit, and at least forces that conversation to change the program if it's not working, or expand the program if it's working really well. And I think that timing comes shortly after the election. Maybe we want another couple weeks to that. I'm not sure. I think anyone that's on the next council will have heard loud and clear whether it's working or not. So to me, it's well timed. If council feels like we need a couple more weeks, then I'd happily be amenable to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nelson. I appreciate that. I would think a couple extra weeks would probably be beneficial. That's awfully close to the election. So if Councillor Nelson was amenable to changing the date to November 15th, possibly.
Highly amenable. That works totally fine for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. To administration then, I guess, does that give enough clarity to administration on what the reasoning is that it comes back at that time, or does administration need something additional?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reasoning, I think, is understood. November 15th gives a couple of weeks after, or a month or so after the municipal election in the fall, to bring this back to the City Council to determine whether it's something that they wish to extend, or if there's remaining funds, they could be repurposed somewhere else. So I think that's well understood.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, considering your comments, Councillor Stashik, I just wonder if council would prefer a end date or mandatory review date. I'm happy either way. I think it accomplishes the same thing, but if it's puts administration council more at ease, if it's a mandatory review, I'd be fine with that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Magoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd like to propose an amendment that the terminology reflect the mandatory review. And if I could just speak to that, I think if we see that the program is absolutely well subscribed to, it's taken on well by the community, it's at that right time of year where it can become part of the budget discussion, which ultimately is where it belongs, because it will have an impact, pardon me, on that budget that's being worked on at that point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoo. Councillor Nelson, I'm assuming that you're okay with that as a friendly amendment. Great, thank you. Council? All right, seeing nothing, we will call to question the direction request that the COVID-19 support program have a mandatory review date of November 15th, 2021. Just sorry, before we call that question, it should probably be prior to November 15th, 2021. I don't know what day that falls on. Hopefully it's not a Sunday.
I'm highly amenable to the prior to. That was the intent. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Sorry, we'll just need to see it one more time then. So the amended direction request that the COVID-19 support program have a mandatory review date prior to November 15th, 2021. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? Sorry, Councillor Wall, was that in favor or opposed? In favor? Okay.
To clarify, in favor.
Perfect, thank you. That was carried unanimously. Council, is there anything further? All right. Seeing nothing further on this matter, that brings us to our third action item for the afternoon, the draft council procedure bylaw number 1153 review. Over to administration, CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council received the updated procedure bylaw 1153 at the March 16th, 2021 standing committee meeting. Direction provided for the updates discussed to be included in an updated version has been brought back to council at today's meeting. Amendments to the bylaw included in this version are changes to the deputy mayor roster, rewording of sections 15.9, 21, and 23, legal advice that was sought on the 2/3 vote component, addition to the definitions section, and a few other areas that saw some revision. Administration and the procedure bylaw committee members may receive questions tonight from council to support discussion and any additional changes. The recommended action is to continue the review at a future standing committee meeting. And after any additional changes are made this evening and after legal review, the document is complete. Alternatively, council could determine that after legal review and the changes or any amendments that are requested tonight, that it come back to a regular meeting for decision. Coming forward to a future standing committee can be accomplished in May at the May 11th meeting. Turn it over to council.
Great, thank you for that, CAO Wilson. Council, comments, questions, discussion? Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the direction that committee direct administration to bring the council procedural bylaw number 1153 to a standing committee meeting for discussion after a legal review has been completed. And then just to speak to that fairly quickly, I think this is just an important next step, is to have the legal review go through the work that we've done so far, make sure everything looks right, make sure it's palatable legally, and then we can, review it at a standing committee and potentially move it forward from there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Councilor Magoon. Council, we have a direction request. Council, comments, questions? Councilor Nelson.
I won't be supporting it. I actually have quite a few questions or concerns. That said, if it comes to the next standing, I could bring them at that time. And just for clarification, the committee was not able to meet prior to this coming. I know it came quite early. I think it was by May 16th was what the motion was. So I wonder if there may be some different ways to approach it. But if council, upon review, feels like it's pretty close, then I would encourage them to vote that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councilor Nelson. Councilor Magoon.
Yeah, I guess, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question then to the rest of council, especially the members of that working committee, if the working committee would like more time to have a look at that before moving it to a legal review, because logically it makes more sense to me that council's generally comfortable with it before we send it off to legal. And then that way, hopefully it streamlines that process to regular council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. So to council and specifically the committee members, comments, questions, Councilor Magoon's question? Oh, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my only comment is I thought today we would take the opportunity to tweak a few things. If there's a few sections that are still not perfect, let's make those changes and send it to legal review and I'd be fine. I think Ms. Rendell did some good work. I think we're very close. There's still I have a few sections that I'd like to look for support, but I think a few changes in legal review and at least we can go from there when that comes forward. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think then what might be best, understanding what I've heard from both the mayor and Councilor Nelson, I'd like to withdraw my motion to give council a little bit more time to potentially tweak things, as the mayor had said. In addition to that, Mr. Chair, and I apologize, I'm fighting the day after effects of the AstraZeneca. If I could rise to a point of personal privilege and then return. Thanks.
Sure, we'll actually take a recess for a few minutes here. Oh, no, sorry, we have, oh, you withdrew your motion. No, we're good. We will take a recess for 5. All right, everyone, welcome back to today's standing committee meeting. We are on the action item for the draft council procedure bylaw number 1153 review. Council, comments, questions, discussion, motions? Anyone? Councillor Haas?
Yeah, I just had, I guess, one question, and I apologize if I couldn't find it or missed it in it, but on in meetings, on the organizational meeting 4.0, it mentions, specifically 4.1.2C, appointments to town committees. There's no reference to who appoints them to us, the council, to committees at that point, and maybe I missed it throughout the document, but the referencing who, which typically is the mayor, is that the intent to continue that, or is there a change to that at all? And should it be mentioned at that point?
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Haas. To administration or to the committee members? Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, I think if need be, we could just reference the council committee's bylaw. Like we have a bylaw that governs that, I think. So maybe just cross-referencing to make sure that we're covered, and then it could just say refer to bylaw 1070-4 or whatever it is.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Nelson. Administration, other members of the committee, anything to add? No? Okay, if that's something we want to do, we'd probably need a direction request. Somebody wanted to furnish that? Or if there's no appetite, that's fine too.
Oh, if I may, I brought it up.
Councillor Haas.
I'd like to direct, committee would like to direct administration to include, I'm sorry, Wendy, I'll wait. Okay, to include referencing the town council committee bylaw in 4.1.2C. And if there needs to be different wording of that, please administration just advise, or if that's clear enough.
Okay. Did you want to see it? Councillor Haas?
Sure, and if there's a bylaw number specifically, preferably, that would be, I'd be amenable to that, of course. That makes it easier too.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Haas. Administration, is there a bylaw, official bylaw name number that's easily accessible that can be added to that direction? CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From Councillor Nelson in the chat, 1070-4, the bylaw to establish council committees.
Okay, if that's the bylaw, yeah, for sure. If we can add that, that'll be fine.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Haas. CEO Olson, did I see your, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a point of clarification as well. I just cross-referenced the current procedure bylaw. During the organizational meeting, there's also the duty to make citizen appointments to boards and committees. So changing, so the appointments to town committees is council, but as well any members of the public that council is appointing to boards and committees. So just a bit of clarification would be needed there, so we don't miss that part.
Okay, I appreciate that, CEO Olson. So if we're going to amend to specifically address council, we likely need to amend to address citizen appointments too. Then, is if I'm understanding what you're saying, CEO Olson. Okay, thank you for that. Council, any additional? Councillor Haas, I guess it's yours. Did you want to address that?
Yeah, if it can encompass both in one direction and give clear to administration, where those changes, I'm totally amenable to that.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. I'm assuming you'd want to look to administration to provide
I would
bylaw
definitely,
name and number.
that was going to be my next statement. I would look to administration for sure to reference that bylaw number.
Okay. To administration then, if that's handy somewhere, or if you need a minute, that's okay too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify the bylaw number for the citizen appointments.
I believe that's what Councillor Hawes was saying. Yes, he'd like to add citizen appointments to his motion as well, and needing whatever bylaw number that is referenced under.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if we just have one moment just to confirm that is within that bylaw, or if it's within another one.
Yep.
We should actually, because of the changes we have to amend our this bylaw. Yeah, it's 1070-4.
Right, Mr. Chair, if I could make a suggestion. So the wording under the current procedure bylaw is captures, I think, a couple of the concerns here. At the annual organizational meeting, council will make citizen appointments to boards and committees, review and formalize the mayor's recommendation of the appointment of councillors to committees of council. Ms. Rendell, just in our taking a look at bylaw 1070-4, including the bylaw number itself in the procedure bylaw. If that bylaw should change, we would need to amend the procedure bylaw as well. So there is a way to pull from 5.4.2 out of our current procedure bylaw that kind of captures both of those in some pretty clear wording, just for council's consideration.
Okay, thank you for that, CEO Wilson. Councillor Hawes, I give it back to you, I guess. Councillor
Yeah, honestly, I mean, as long as it's captured in the procedure bylaw, whom is making it, I think, I think, because I don't want to convolute this situation. If we got, we're naming one bylaw in another bylaw, and then one bylaw changes, of course, and we got to change all the bylaws. So, I mean, as long as the wording, and I don't have the wording from the current procedure bylaw, unfortunately, in front of me, but if council is okay and administration, can, I just would like to capture it in the procedure bylaw who's appointing these, and it's not in this current revision. So if the current procedure bylaw we have captures that, I'd prefer that personally, then, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, is there any opposition to Councillor Hawes changing his motion to reflect the current wording of the council's procedure bylaw in regards to citizen and council appointments to town committees? Okay, seeing no one on council in opposition to that. Councillor Hawes, are you okay with letting administration draft some wording for that then?
Absolutely. Yes, please. Yeah, we'll scrap the one that I started, and
I don't see it on my screen. It's not logged on.
Chair, the committee directed administration to include section 5.4.2 of bylaw 1060-6. What that includes, I would actually get even look to specify that further. So 5.4.2 A and B is A and B. Are the specific pieces of that section that capture the discussion of council tonight. I would also suggest that we include the section that is going in the new bylaw. So under 4.1.2 to include A and B as well, and remove. Now I'm getting convoluted as well. So we're really replacing 4.1.2C with section 5.4.2A and B of bylaw 1060-6, if that makes it any clearer.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I could ask, CEO Olson, could you just read out A and B just so that it is, hearing it? Don't have to type it out, just hear it.
Sure. So 5.4.2A says make citizen appointments to boards and committees. B is review and formalize the mayor's recommendation of the appointment of councillors to committees of council.
Yeah, that's ultimately, if I may, Mr. Chair, ultimately that was my goal, is to have, those, specifically to the mayor, but then, with Olson's input in regards to the community committees as well. So that was my intent, to try and capture that in this bylaw, so it's clear on where they are, who is appointing them or recommending them. So I'd like to let this direction stand. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. I just ask administration and Councillor Hawes to take a look at the proposed direction. I think there's something missing there. I think it should be 4.1.2C, but I've looked to administration for their guidance on that. I don't believe we want to replace the whole of 4.1.2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. 4.1.2C.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Council, we have a direction request before us. Are there any comments, questions, or discussion? Okay, seeing no one would call to question. The committee direct administration to replace 4.1.2C of bylaw number 1153 with section 5.4.2A and B of bylaw 1060-6. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That was carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Councillor Nelson.
I guess I almost wish that Councillor Magoon made his motion. For me, I'm not certain if this is going to be referred back to committee, or this is going, next step is legal review, or this is coming back to standing. That will kind of impact how I approach the rest of the document. There's some philosophical things and there's lots of editorial things, and I'm just not, I don't want to start making 15 different directions that we spend a bunch of time wordsmithing depending on where this is going next. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Nelson. And with that, I'd like to ask a clarifying question of Mayor Michaels. Mayor Michaels, earlier in the conversation, you indicated that you felt it needed a little more tweaking. I just wanted to clarify if you intended that tweaking happen here today with council, or if you wanted it to go back to committee for some additional tweaking. To Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To me, I'm open doing the tweaking here. Editorial stuff can be sent via email to administration. That doesn't take place at a council meeting. If there's grammar or things of that nature, please send it to Sandra. The final draft will come to council. There's no place for that here. Now, for conceptual changes, I was looking at tonight with a few of them. I want to touch on section 17, and if Councillor Nelson or anyone else for that matter has any conceptual things to focus on, let's spend a little bit of time tonight, because I'm comfortable getting a legal review. If that's not the will of council, then I'll listen to that, and we'll send it back to a committee. But to me, I don't think there's a whole lot. So I hope that answers your question from my perspective. Thank you.
It does. Speaking only for myself, that brings some additional clarity that your comment was the intent that council work on this tonight, and that's something I support too. If there's changes that council wants to see, I think now's the time to do it. So Turn it back over to council. Councillor Nelson.
So 4.6.3, which is page 18 of 64. I'm just curious what the process looks like to confirm that we are alone. So, if we're in a closed session, we already, I think other place in the document says that we have to be alone. Do we want a section that requires us to individually confirm to the chair that we are in fact alone?
Okay, thank you.
I guess if we're putting directions forward, I can just put a direction forward to remove that. I guess if that's kind of the process we're looking at tonight. But.
Okay. Did you want to put a direction forward?
Sure.
Okay.
Direct administration to remove the first sentence of section 4.6.3.
Okay. Did you want to speak to it, Councillor Nelson?
No, I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Council, we have a direction request. Comments, questions, discussion. Okay. Well, seeing no one, we would call the question to direct administration to remove the first sentence of section 4.6.3. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that was carried 5-1. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to go to section 17. Conceptually, we've changed. We're looking at postponing. We took away not took away, but there's no tabling in this. So by postponing, we're speaking to times and dates. I was looking at White Court and I think Grand Prairie, and I think it would be better, especially in our procedural bylaw, you have new councillors, to specify something that you could postpone this to later in the meeting. So right now, as it reads, it's a specific time to which the matter is postponed, provisions that the matter is to be postponed indefinitely. It's not as clear. So with that, I'd like to put forward a direction that I'd like to move that section 17 to include (17.1). My apologies. To include to later in the meeting. And if I may continue to speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Please.
I think it's one of a few changes that I'd like to make in that category, since we don't have tabling. If we're going to use the term postpone to postpone things, let's make it clear to anyone on council that, hey, we can postpone this to later in the meeting. I also think there's a provision that we should specify that if it's postponed and without a time or date, that it gets automatically brought to the next meeting, like some other bylaws and other municipalities have, that is automatically triggered. And again, I refer to the term tabling. Sometimes you table something, and if it's not brought back from the floor, it goes to the next agenda automatically. We no longer have that. I'm just trying to find a solution in order to clarify. But my first focus, like I said, is just to add later in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council. Discussion on the proposed direction. Councillor Ross.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not against this at all, Mayor Michaels, and this change. I just to clarify, because I'm reading 7.1.1, a specific time to which the matter is postponed. So wouldn't that cover the individual the councillor who is asking to postpone, could then with that 7.1 say, postpone until the end of the meeting, or postpone until, so I'm not at all of that, changing it or making this addition. I just see that the possibility is already there with 7.1.1, but maybe I guess the question, and Mayor Michaels can respond, or maybe his thoughts are different than how I'm interpreting that. So
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree that it's not a huge difference, but to me, if it's set to a specific time, if it says to a later in the meeting and also a specific time and date, to me, that doesn't, I don't know, section 17 still doesn't, I still have other issues, like I said. So I'm trying to look at this holistically. And I don't like the other section that says only time also. To me, it should be time and date. So I know I'm not overly answering your question. I'm just trying to add more clarity to a section that I don't overly like. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councillor Haas, did you have a follow-up?
no, and I agree with it maybe where that is just personally adding more than just time, but also to specify a date, whether it's late in the meeting and we specify later, or, and maybe it's after, or, maybe it'd be hard to do a specific time potentially, but that it is on this date, we want to discuss it. So maybe it is a simple change of that or addition to that, or again, we can, look at, and I'm interested to hear what the rest of the council thinks as well. So, because I think it is important we discuss this, because there's always been a lot of discussion around postponing and tabling, and that we are specific in our procedure bylaw in the future for not only us, but also future council as well. So.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Haas, for bringing that. I could, if there's no opposition, I'd like to add to it to include later in the meeting and date, because if you read it, that's my concern. It doesn't say date until 17.3, where it says any matter that has been postponed to a particular date or indefinitely shall not be considered. Otherwise, it doesn't say date at all. So I was going to address date after, but if my motion can include date and later in the meeting, it will add some clarity that a councillor knows, hey, I can postpone something to a time, a date later in the meeting. Right now, without any changes to this, it's a bit weird. It doesn't say that you could, specify another date. It just says another time. I hope that brings some clarity, because. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council, is there any opposition to Mayor Michaels changing his wording of his direction? Councillor Waugh.
No opposition, but I was wondering if we'd be able to see the motion as it's been amended, just because we've been talking for a bit.
Yep. So it's the one that says that section 17.1 to include to no later in the meeting and date. Sorry, to later in the meeting and date. Councillor Waugh.
No, thanks. Yeah, I'm just trying to reconcile it. Thank you.
Before I go to councils, I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble reconciling it too. If I could hear what the full 17.1.1 would say once it's amended, I might have a better handle on it, but I'm a little confused with the wording. Mayor Michaels or to administration?
If I may, I defer to administration. For me today at a standing committee meeting, I want to include these things. And if the wording by Ms. Rendell, whatever that may be, I'm fine with that. I don't need to do it on the spot. But conceptually, in section 17, it doesn't say the word date, but it says it as if a date is selected, then do this. That to me is misleading. It should say time and date, so it's clear. I'm just thinking of new counselors. So for me, I'm okay with Ms. Rendell when it comes back to us to put whatever grammatical sort of flow to it as needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mayor Michaels. That was my concern, was the specific wording of the amendment. I didn't know how it fit into the existing 17.1.1. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I think if the quotations are gone, I'll vote in favor of it because it gives administration the ability to format and make 17.1 function as a whole, however it kind of reads best. So I think that's what I was struggling with, is the wording was in quotation. So beyond that, same thing. I want to see administration make 17.1 make as much sense as possible. And I don't think we have the tools to do that on the fly here. So, but overall, I support the intention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council. I'm just going to roll back a little bit then, and I guess to Councillor Nelson, is that a request for a friendly amendment to remove the quotations, just for clarification?
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, Michaels, are you okay with that?
I am, thank you.
Okay. Okay, that brings some additional clarity and comfort for me as well too. So, Council, is there anything further before we call this to question? Okay, seeing no one, take a look at the direction request. That section 17.1 to include to later in the meeting and date. Council? All those in favor? That was carried unanimously. Council? Any additional comments, questions, changes, debate, discussion? Councilor Nelson?
I'll make a direction that section 9.10 be amended to state obtain permission. If I could speak to it, it says, while a meeting of council in progress, he or she shall rise and await the chair's permission before leaving. That's a little bit cumbersome, especially in the Zoom world. I think just obtaining permission, similar to how Councillor Magoon did earlier in the meeting, is probably more appropriate for the way we do business. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to try to work in an amendment there. And of course, Councillor Nelson can see if he feels it's friendly. I'd tack on to the end of that, notwithstanding point of personal privilege. That's just part of Robert's Rules of Order. Rising to a point of personal privilege is non-debatable even by the chair. It is something that every member is entitled to. So it's really just a matter of clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Nelson, are you okay with that?
I think point of privileges are spoken to a few times and defined. So I think it's probably covered elsewhere, but I think if it goes to legal review or Ms. Rendell makes those changes, if it feels appropriate at that time to add Robert's rules or whatever, I'd be fine with that, but I don't see any real benefit in amending the direction that's on the table.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. So, Councillor Magoon, the friendly amendment request wasn't accepted. So, if you wanted to make a formal amendment or not,
I will. I'll let the formal amendment stand, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So, Council, we have a proposed amendment on the table currently. So, if we could keep the comments discussion to the amendment for now, and the amendment is not to include. Sorry, it would include. With the original motion, notwithstanding point of privilege. Sorry, personal point of privilege. So we'll go back to council. Council, are there any comments, questions, or discussion regarding the amendment? Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, just to clarify, Mr. Chair, I think, again, we had talked about a few of these and how they impact new councillors potentially. And if they're going through the procedure bylaw, I think they may not understand what a point of personal privilege is. That's why I sort of think it's important to have there. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Nelson?
I if I could request a friendly amendment through this document, it's referred to as a question of privilege, not a point of privilege. Just it keeps the verbiage the same as the rest of the document, or we could also look at changing the entire document to say point of privilege rather than question of privilege, as that's the terminology that we're more accustomed to. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Ragoon, are you okay with changing it to question of privilege?
Actually, that might, no, depending on what the correct reference in Robert's Rules of Order are. And you know what, I'm just realizing now that that's something I didn't catch on, was that verbiage difference. And I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, great, because it's easier on all of us. My understanding from Robert's Rules of Order is that it's identified as a point of personal privilege. If I'm wrong, great, then we can keep it. But if we're saying that we follow, Robert's Rules of Order, but then we change the verbiage on important, items like that, then we probably want to align those through the whole document, as Councillor Nelson had mentioned. But again, I could be wrong. I'd be happy to be corrected.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Ragoon. Look to administration to see if they can provide some clarity. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just referencing the definitions on page 35 and 36, point of privilege and question of privilege are defined separately. So they're two different, it's not interchangeable. So I would direct council to take a look there, and any changes required, it would need to be addressed through definitions as well.
Sorry, CEO Olson, if I could just clarify what page is that on?
Page 35 of 64 and 36 of 64. So point of privilege is section 30.21 and question of privilege is 30.25.
Thank you for that clarification, CA Olson, and reading those over quickly. Yeah, they are quite different things. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to CA Olson. Yeah, that's exactly it. 30.21.2 on page 35. That would be the one that I was looking to reference under a point of privilege. So yeah, I would like it to stay the same.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council. All right, seeing no one else who would like to speak to the proposed amendment, I'd call the proposed amendment to question. Council, this is a proposed amendment to Councillor Nelson's original direction request. That section 9.10 be amended to state obtain permission, include notwithstanding point of personal privilege. Council, all those in favor of the proposed amendment? Sorry, I just have to switch screens, sorry. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that was carried unanimously. So the amendment is passed and we will go back now to the original direction request. Council? Okay, seeing no one would like to speak to the direction request, we'd call it to question. That section 9.10 be amended to state obtain permission notwithstanding point of personal privilege. Council, all those in favor? That was carried unanimously. Thank you. Council. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction that administration review question of privilege and point of privilege and ensure appropriate and consistent usage. And if I could speak to it, largely point of privilege only exists in one point of the document. And I think between the two documents, a lot of the point of privileges were replaced in the new document with question of privilege. And so I had questions about the definitions of one being there and but not really used much within the document. So I just want to make sure that we're ensuring that we're good there and with Robert's rules and the MGA and everything else, and that it's clearly understood. I'll probably spend a bit more time on it. I can only imagine if I'm confused now, what a new counselor would feel like in a few months here. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, any comments, questions, or discussion on the proposed direction? Okay. Seeing none, we'll call it to question. That administration review question of privilege and point of privilege and ensure appropriate and consistent usage. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That was carried unanimously. Council, Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction, and I'm going to keep it broad. So for council, it's section 9.4 and 9.5. But the direction is that section 9 no longer reflect the public's ability to address council after the minute with council has completed. And if I could speak to it, I don't love the wording of the direction, but I think it makes sense. Section 9.4 opens the door to something that was closed before, which at any point a member of the public can speak to council in the middle of a meeting, providing they are permitted by the chair. And 9.5.1 speaks to that as well. So that's a philosophical thing that would be a pretty big change from this council and how we've done business and this new procedural bylaw. And I remember very clearly the reasons that it was changed. I think just before our council was elected, and in that there was a lot of participation from random people during meetings, and it didn't lend itself to good decision-making and professionalism. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Nelson. I was going to speak to it, but before I do all that, C.A. Wilson. Go ahead, C.A. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recall we discussed this item when the procedure bylaw came forward at the last time to council, and there was some discussion around a person who is not a member or administration that could include like a delegation or presentation or a subject matter expert that is brought in by administration to support the contents of a report before council. So that is not a person of the public gallery necessarily, but a person that might have a role within the meeting. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for that, C.A. Wilson. And that was one of the things that I was going to address. I do recall having that discussion that there could be other people who are participating in the meeting who may not be a member or administration, who would still need to have the opportunity to speak. So there may be some wordsmithing required there, but in terms of 9.5.1, I do agree. I feel it can be very disruptive to a meeting to have members of the public gallery, especially if it's a very controversial item, that are potentially constantly seeking permission from the chair to speak. Even if the chair denies the permission to speak every time, he still has to address it every time. And I agree that I don't feel that is beneficial to good governance. I think that the fact that there is a provision that allows for a member of the public to speak at every public open council meeting, should they choose to, is opportunity for citizens to be able to participate in the process and to be able to communicate their thoughts and opinions on matters without interceding in the process part of the meeting where council's discussing, debating, and making decisions. So I do agree with 9.5.1 for sure. 9.4 may need some massaging of the words so it's more clear, but I do agree with council for sure. Thank you. Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, I think it is well defined within the definitions. Another place within the document, it speaks of delegates and officers. And an officer is anybody that administration considers a delegate, and a delegate is anybody that's part of a delegation. So neither of those within our procedural bylaw, I think those are separate from member of the public. So again, however we need to word the direction so that we don't open the door to something that we all agreed was not appropriate. And I can speak personally, before I was on council, I was part of that, and it was really strange. And after the fact, you realize it's just not a professional way of doing business, and yeah, not great for decision making. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council? Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I request to see the direction again?
Please. Ms. Anderson?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Anderson. Yeah, did you have a comment or question, or you just wanted to see it, Mayor Michaels?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this, the same concept I think Councillor Nelson just explained. As long as it's massaged to make sure that it doesn't inhibit other things, I think some language could be changed there, and some sections could be omitted to reflect sort of the will that we have, that we don't want somebody to just be able to continuously ask to speak to us. So whatever that looks like, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Mayor Michaels? Council? Okay, seeing no one else who would like to speak to the matter, we'd call to question that section 9 no longer reflect the public's ability to address council after the minute with council has completed. Council, all those in favor? That was carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Council? Councilor Nelson?
It's up to section 6.3. And this is something I'm fine with the document, but I wonder if council is. It says the chair may ask clarifying questions of those presenting at minute with council. So that would mean that no member of council outside of the chair could ask any questions of those presenting at minute with council. So if council's comfortable with that, cool. If they're not, that's I could make a direction, or somebody else could make a direction as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Councilor Magoon? You're muted, Councilor Magoon.
Sorry about that. And thanks, Councilor Nelson, for bringing that up. This was one I had been thinking on back and forth. So I'd be happy to make that. But again, thank you for bringing that up. I'd like to make the direction that 6.3 reflect council as a whole and not just the chair. And I'll just let that stand as is.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Councilor Nelson?
Can I possibly request a friendly amendment that just says at the discretion of the chair? And if I could speak to it, just so that we're not getting into this weird spot, and it's like there are times where it could make sense, but we don't want to turn Minute with Council into a big hoopla of asking a lot of questions and making it almost an agenda item. I just think making sure the chair is the key person in that is still important.
Thank you for that, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Magoon, would you want to accept that as a?
Yeah,
friendly amendment?
absolutely. Yeah, you betcha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I wonder if this one is one too, I appreciate bringing this up because I think it is important that as council, we can maybe ask a question, but maybe it's where it's through the chair. Maybe that the only point of person that is speaking with the person within the council is our chair, but maybe the council, I'd like to, ask a question through the chair to I guess, community member, something like that. I guess, I don't know. I just worry about the back and forth that we create by asking them direct questions. I think still the chair asking that question or making sure we go through the chair. Now, maybe that's the intent of the wording. Maybe that's, maybe I'm off base on this one, but that's just my thoughts on it. So.
Councillor Hawes. With no one else in queue, I'd speak to it. I was actually more comfortable with it before it had to go through the chair. I'm not comfortable with it or going through the chair. When a delegation presents or anybody else, anyone on council has the opportunity to ask a question of the delegation. And I don't think that that's a fair imposition to put on the chair to make a decision about whether a council member's question is legitimate or not. Because regardless of whether the chair gives permission to answer it or not, the question has been asked. So it creates a whole other political football if the chair doesn't let the citizen respond to the councillor's question. So the way it's worded right now with the friendly amendment, I won't support it. I actually preferred it before when it was just simply that council may ask clarifying questions. Councillor Hawes?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stashik, for bringing that up. I guess, yeah, it would put no intent of putting the chair in an awkward position because you're correct. The question is already asked, and it puts him, whomever is chairing, in a difficult position. So, yeah, I guess I wouldn't be in support of the amendment either afterwards. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council? Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, I guess then to any other councillors out there, it's certainly possible to still make an amendment to this motion. So I have to say I hadn't considered Councillor Stashik's position. I think it's well thought out, actually. It wasn't an angle I had considered. So I think I could certainly be brought around to that way of thinking now that you pointed that out.
So, Council, we have a proposed direction before us. There's some different ways we could go about it, I guess, if we're not, if there are some changes that would like to be requested, if the original mover could withdraw and a new motion could be put forward, an amendment could be proposed. There's a few different ways we could go about this. So I'd turn it back over to Councillor Nelson.
Can one withdraw a previously made request for a friendly amendment, Mr. Chair?
That's a good question. That's way above the chair's heading, and I have to defer to administration on that one. CEO Olson.
Mr. Chair, one moment, Ms. Rendell's forming a response. So they're looking to withdraw the friendly amendment.
If it's easier to just withdraw and make another one, that's fine too. I think we're all getting to the same place on this, so I'm comfortable whatever way we go.
Yeah, that might be cleaner and a little bit quicker if there was an appetite for the mover to do that. That would probably be fine. Councillor Nelson, did you want to?
Well, I think the motion is Councillor Magoon's, though.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, Councilor Magoon. It's hard when you can't see it.
Sorry, yeah, no, I missed that too. Thanks, Councillor Nelson. Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to withdraw.
Okay, Council, is there any opposition to Councilor Magoon withdrawing his motion? Okay, seeing none, the motion's withdrawn. Council? Councilor Magoon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a direction that section 6.3 reflect council as a whole and not just the chair. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council? Any comments, questions, discussion around the proposed motion? Okay, seeing none, we would call to question. That section 6.3 reflect council as a whole and not just the chair. Council, all those in favor? And that was carried unanimously. Council? Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, section 22.3. I think there's some wording off, but it also is a section that I'm not sure what the wording change may lead to. I do have concerns about a notice of motion being required to be submitted 10 days prior to the meeting. But I'm not sure what the kind of correct wording was meant to be. I'm guessing it was probably no less than 10 days prior.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. We look to administration to see if they, do you have any clarity on that, C.A. Olson?
Ms. Randall?
No, thank you, C.A. Olson. Yeah, I'll add no less than 10 days prior.
Okay, to administration then, do you need direction from council to make that change, or is that just a typo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that was just an omission. That's something that administration included.
Okay. Oh, Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, I wasn't really concerned about the wording as much. I am concerned about a requirement of 10 days prior to a notice of motion being submitted. To me, if it's been put in writing at any point before the meeting starts, that to me is it, or maybe at words before the agenda package is sent out. By reducing the number of meetings that we have a month, we're already reducing council's opportunity to bring something forward. And it concerns me that then becomes 10 days as well. And, ultimately it could be a 3-month process to bring anything forward if it's not something that the agenda prep committee supports, which I just don't think gives us the opportunity to respond to citizens appropriately, but I'm not sure how to motion that. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilor Nelson. Councilor Magoon?
Yeah, I certainly agree with Councillor Nelson's concerns. I think in this case, even just dropping everything after notice of motion, so that after CAO, so no less than. Again, I have no problem with if a councillor wants to submit, a notice of motion, it being electronic or in writing, that's reasonable. But again, we've established that the mayor, for example, and council can call a special meeting of council within an extremely short period. So to me, Councilor Nelson's right. It doesn't quite align, right? We're saying, well, we can call a meeting, but we can't submit a notice of motion on extremely short notice. So yeah, I guess my recommendation would be to drop everything after the CAO, but I'll listen to the rest of council if they have any other concerns.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council? I guess I do have a clarifying question for either the committee members or administration regarding the intent of 22.3 22.3 in its entirety. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand the intent of submitting the notice of motion when there's already provision for how a member may do notice of motion addressed in 22.1. It's hard because there is obviously some wording impropriety in there, so it's hard to figure out how they mesh, but I'm not sure how 22.3 and 22.1 mesh together. See, Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, I think it's the in writing part is or to appear on the upcoming meeting. I think if I remember right, if it's going to be on the agenda package, administration needs it early enough to have it included on that agenda as a notice of motion written under the notice of motion section, which does make some sense. I don't believe it would preclude somebody from making a notice of motion during a meeting or at any point before a meeting. But if it is just so that it is in writing on the next agenda, I think that's just needs to be clarified more. And I think maybe the 10 days was aligning. I think something else with delegations is 10 days, and that because now we have different agenda times or package times for regular and standing. Fridays for standing, and then Wednesdays for regular. There's, picking an arbitrary number of days before, I think maybe was more simple. So yeah, maybe if it was just worded in writing the day prior to the agenda being released or something, but I'm grasping at straws. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. And I may not achieve any additional clarity, but I'll follow up on my own question anyway. If I understand the process as it's laid out here, so a member would submit a notice of motion to the CAO so that it would appear on the agenda. Subsequent to that, 22.1 comes into play where the member actually makes the motion or he actually gives notice per 22.1.1 at the council meeting. And then subsequent to that, the motion comes forward at the next regular meeting of council. Is that the process as it's laid out here? Eoi Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, flipping to our current procedure bylaw and back, there's a bit more detail given to that process in our current procedure bylaw. The piece that I was wondering if 22.3 was intending to provide some direction for was the supply of supporting documents. There's under section 22, there's no direction on the supporting documents piece that was included in the previous one. And if there was, and if the 10 days doesn't quite fit with that rationale, but under our current procedure bylaw, there's a request that any supporting documentation after the notice of motion is made at the council meeting prior to it being put on the agenda. There's a time period where supporting documentation can be provided to the CAO to be included when that comes before council at the next regular. So I kind of was looking at that thinking maybe that is what its intent is to allow for documentation to be provided, but the 10 days doesn't quite mesh with that either. I think there's likely some review under 22 in general that's needed to clarify.
Thank you for that, Eoi Olson. Yeah, if that was the intent of 22.3, that makes more sense than the process that seemed a bit convoluted in my head. If it's to address member contributed supporting document to the motion that they made the notice of motion for, that makes more sense. But I would turn it back to the committee and to administration for some additional information. Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction that administration update section 22 to achieve increased clarity.
Can you just back up a bit, please?
update section 22, notices of motion, to achieve clarity. If I could, hopefully that gives enough leeway. And if Ms. Rendell needs to reach out just via email to the committee members, we can always spit that back out to council members or however the process is. I don't think we can make a direction that's clear enough to achieve what we need to achieve. So hopefully that does what administration needs. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Nelson. Council, there is a proposed direction before us. Any comments, questions, or discussion? Okay, seeing no one that would wish to speak, we'd call the question that administration update section 22, notices of motion to achieve clarity. Council, all those in favor? That was carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Council, additional items. Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess going off that concept for section 22, I struggle with section 18 is extremely difficult, I believe, to understand. I guess my question to administration, and I'm trying to go back on some of the conversations we've had as a committee, but is there a need for section 18.1? And if so, could it be simplified in order to what I understand it to be is that you just cannot add any amendments after the ask to refer is made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Administration, Steve Olson.
Ms. Rendell, is there any clarification to provide?
Thank you, CA Olson. I think that we can just go back and reword that so it's more clear for everybody to understand.
Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my follow-up, do we need direction for that, or does Ms. Randall, is she okay with rewording that?
I think since the previous direction that Councillor Nelson made was a direction to administration to rewrite a section to provide some additional clarity, just in terms of consistency, maybe it would be a good idea to put a direction forward on this one as well, if that's your appetite, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, if I can ask Ms. Anderson to use the same verbiage as section 22 and reflect section 18.
Good with that, Mayor Michaels?
I am, and if I can speak to it, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
As I said, section 18.1 is my major concern. That's a little bit more challenging, but I also think there's some work in section 18.2, to maybe put some info. I know the definition states to refer is to get more information, but maybe that clarity could also be used in section 18.2 to state that this is about supplying or about asking for more information in order to refer something. So if you cross-reference, like I said, and you look at the definition, it might be better suited to have some of it in section 18 itself. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Mayor Michaels. Councillor Nelson.
I'll be voting very much in favor of this. I think the motion to refer is something our council hasn't used much, but could be a very valuable tool. And I think the reason we haven't is there hasn't been kind of enough clarity of what it's trying to achieve. So thanks for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the proposed direction? CA Olson.
Mr. Chair, just before it's called to question, I just want to ensure that administration understands what clarity means in these two sections. The motion, the one before is pretty straightforward. This one, I just want to make sure that we understand what the clarity that's being sought is, especially as it applies to 18.1. Ms. Rendell, was there enough discussion to understand that under 18.1, what clarity or what changes should be considered?
I think that just as long as I reword that section to
Okay.
the terms on which the matter is being referred, so then.
Okay, yeah. Great. Thank you, Ms. Rendell has clarity on the clarity that's being sought. I just wanted to make sure before we moved ahead that we didn't have any additional questions.
Okay. Mayor Michaels, did you have anything further that you wanted to add regarding clarity?
And no, like, I guess my focus is two things. Essentially, to me, it just reads, no amendments can be done until you deal with that question of referring. And it's just very long for that one concept. And the other one, and to Ms. Rendell's discretion, I don't know if there's even a need to it. So whatever she believes is her recommendation, it might be, yeah, more or less. But to me, it's, yeah, I'm probably not helping the situation, but I want to give the latitude to Ms. Rendell that if it's not necessary to say, or it could be put in another section that if you refer something, you got to deal with referring. You can't continue amending stuff. To me, I took that as automatic. It's you have a motion on the floor to refer. To add amendments to the original one, to me was automatic. So that, yeah, it's a challenging section for me. Thanks.
Right. Okay. Okay. So some additional clarity on the wording just to make it easier to understand. Okay. Okay. I'm good as long as administration is good. Okay, council, anything further on the proposed direction? Okay. Call the question that administration update section 18 motions to refer to achieve clarity. Council, all those in favor? Yeah, it was carried unanimously. Thank you. Council? Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, I don't have anything else on this matter, but I had more of a procedural question. And if there are some things that arise between now and when this comes back to standing, is council or committee open for Ms. Rendell to send via emails questions through the committee members? I don't know if it needs to be referred to committee. I don't think we need to collect any meeting fees, but there could be some back and forth that could provide value to before it comes to standing.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Sorry, my apologies. That was a question to administration. To council.
I'm just not sure if it's what is procedurally appropriate, because I don't think it needs to be referred to committee, but I do think there might be some advantage in having some back and forth just via email between the committee. So it's more if council's okay with that. Obviously, if it's a philosophical thing or a major change, it would come. But if it's some of these smaller edits, and even looking at those clarifying things, I think based on the conversation, we could probably work through some of those edits. So when it comes to standing next, it's ready to go.
Okay. Is there anyone would like to speak to that? Council, committee, administration? Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really like that transparency because Councilor Nelson and I didn't want this to come back to committee. We charge it and then we're off base with council again. It was a bit of a, let's just get through this together. But if I would strongly support the ability to help clarify maybe some of the intent with Ms. Rendell, if she has any. If she has none, by no means, but if the committee can do work via email without charging to get input, I support that. So I appreciate Councilor Nelson saying that because sometimes administration may take the leeway to just do that, but there's no real policy. Can administration go back just to the committee members? So I appreciate having an open conversation in the public about that ability to potentially do so. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Back to council or administration. Are there any other comments, questions, or concerns regarding communication with the committee regarding the procedure bylaw before it comes back? Okay, seeing no one. Is there anything else, council, regarding the procedure bylaw today? We're still open, no rush. Can't be perfect yet, is it? Okay, Oh, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, are we comfortable for this to come to a regular meeting or a standing meeting? Because I think we haven't given that direction yet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mayor Michaels. There's been quite a few directions. I don't recall. Administration, was there a direction for that to come back to standing, or was it to go to legal, or none of the above? Not been made yet?
Mr. Chair, the motion was made and then withdrawn so that the
Right.
conversation could continue.
Right, yeah. Thank you for that clarification, and thank you, Mayor Michaels, for bringing that up. So council administration would likely need some additional direction on where you'd like this document to come back to council. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess I'll give this one a try. That committee direct administration to bring the council procedure bylaw number 1153 to a standing committee meeting for discussion after a legal review has been completed.
Okay.
And again,
thank you for that, Councilor Magoon. Sorry, did you
Thank-
want to speak to it? I got hands flying.
No, I'm good. I'll back away and see what happens.
Okay, CAO Olson, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just one suggestion to bring procedure bylaw number 1153 as amended to a standing committee meeting, and then it captures all the things that we did and discussed in the motions that council made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, CAO Olson. Council? Okay, I did want to bring a concern forward that we have made quite a few changes today to direct administration. I just wanted to make sure that council's comfortable with administration making those changes and then forwarding it to legal before it comes back for council's eyes on it again, knowing that if there are going to be additional changes from council, it's likely going to need another legal review. My personal opinion is I would like council to be as comfortable as they can be that they're done having their hands on it before it goes to legal. So I just want to throw that out there that, are you guys comfortable having it go to legal and before it comes back, or do we want to look at it once more before it goes to legal? Councilor Magoon?
Yeah, I'd be happy to accept that as a friendly amendment. Again, it just makes more sense. And if we just want to make sure all the concerns are ironed out first, I'm great with that.
Okay, council? Administration, then I guess Councilor Magoon's willing to take that as a friendly amendment. Is there any issue regarding timelines for having that come back to standing once more for discussion before it goes to legal? CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the date at which it could be brought back could come to the May 11th standing committee meeting for continued discussion. I'm sorry, we were conferring over the amendment and I made this. Hopefully that answers the question. If not, I'd be happy to take another go at it.
It was just in terms of timing, if there's any risk or any danger in having this come back to council at a standing committee one more time before it goes off to legal for review, knowing it's going to have to come back to us again after legal review.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for clarifying that. There's no risk. The only impact really is to timelines. Having it come to the May 11th meeting after the changes have been implemented, another discussion with council, and then going for legal review should it be ready at that point to move ahead. It's the only impact is to timeline. Otherwise, there's no risk.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay, Councilor Magoon's indicated he's willing to accept that as a friendly amendment. So I'm happy with that too. Council, is there any other further discussion, comments, questions to be? Great, seeing none, we call the question. That committee direct administration to bring the council procedure bylaw number 1153 as amended to the May 11th, 2021 standing committee meeting for discussion. Council, all those in favor? That was carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, council, is there anything further on the procedure bylaw before we move on? Okay, seeing nothing, that brings us to information items. 2021 Corporate Vision Action Plan. CEO Olson.
Mr. Chair, this report is before council tonight to provide an opportunity for discussion and understanding of the outstanding piece to the strategic corporate and budget planning process. In the fall, administration brought forward an updated strategic plan for council's consideration. At that time, council requested to review the corporate plan to determine support for changes to the strategic planning process and the strategic plan itself. The process that is included in the annual reporting and budget schedule includes strat planning, corporate planning in collaboration with council to develop the corporate vision action plan, and then budget preparation and approval, closing out that schedule. The Corporate Vision Action Plan, or CVAP, is provided for information in this report to demonstrate the information and layout of the corporate plan that administration has been working on. The actions included are administrative commitments intended to action and advance council's strategic plan. After review of the strat plan and discussion around council's priority focus areas, administration can use this template to present potential actions that support those areas. The draft document that's included in this report tonight is presented to council for discussion, and the final actions financially supported through the budget process. So the actions that are included in the attachment to this report are actual actions that administration is undertaking and had included in the budget if needed, if they needed any kind of budget to support them moving forward. So we're looking for some feedback tonight on the document, on the process itself. The process is reflected in the annual reporting and budget schedule, which was previously approved by council. But wanting to get some feedback from council on the corporate vision action plan, on the intention of the document, make sure that that's clear, and as it is administration's intent to move ahead with that schedule, including the development of a corporate vision action plan with council in the fall. So typically this document would come forward, we'd have discussion tonight, we'd amend what's included as actions and the commitments of administration to advance the strategic plan, and have a collaborative process there. And then those items would be, if needed, included in the budget if they needed funding. But the corporate vision action plan would be a document that council approves. Due to the time constraints, and that this is a new process, and we wanted to ensure that council was comfortable with this prior to moving into the process for 2022. We're bringing this forward as an information item to demonstrate the value of a corporate vision action plan, how it relates to the strategic plan overall, and what council's role is in assisting or directing what's included as far as those actions. Ms. Way has done a great job pulling this together, working with the different departments to populate what's included. Those are real items. They're really happening. So it's not a document that's just for demonstration purposes. It can also serve as a list of actions that are committed to by the organization to advance council's strategic plan in 2021. So at this point, I will turn things back to council. Ms. Way is here to assist in providing explanation to council if needed. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council, are there any comments, questions, discussion, direction regarding the 2021 Corporate Vision Action Plan? Councilor Nelson?
I guess in trying to understand the whole process, the document that was presented to council that we ultimately didn't approve, what happens with that as we move forward into the new budget process?
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. To administration, CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the amended or the updated strategic plan was not adopted by council. It still exists. It's coming forward through that budget, annual reporting and budget schedule in kind of May, June. So we'll bring forward that document as well as council's current approved strategic plan, have a discussion about the direction that council wants to provide those documents. Now, seeing how they all fit together and how a strategic plan then feeds into the corporate plan that feeds into budget. That's planned for later on this spring so that council can provide some direction whether to amend the strategic plan, make some additional changes, direct administration to do anything with that, or continue with the current strategic plan that's been in place since 2017.
Okay. Thank you, CA Olson. Council? Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, I think what I'm struggling with is we've struggled through our term really tying everything back to our strategic plan. And this is as much to council as it is administration. And my concern is that we have I think an outstanding motion to update our CSP. We have a strat plan, we have a corporate vision plan, and now we have a corporate vision action plan. To me, as someone that needs to be able to clearly communicate to the public what our focus is and what our priority is, I'm concerned about how many different plans that give direction to administration. And I don't know if it's fair to administration to be looking in so many different places for direction. So I think as we move forward, fewer documents and more focus is the direction that I would like to see us go. I like this list. It's, a far better visual of almost what the action tracker is. And if this was tied simply to just our strat plan and everything within our strat plan, rather than, because there's things within our strat plan that aren't on this list. So things can kind of get lost. So I just find overall a lot of our documents to be confusing, especially to communicate back out to the public. So just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My outlook's a bit different. I think this is great. It's much clearer, and honestly, and I say this to every member of council, if there's something that we want on it, we add it. In the options, it tells us to bring this back to a standing committee. We can add something to it. We can make it our own. Administration, I think, did a wonderful job of not having a strategic plan that we supported last year. That was not actually on admin and council. It was on council only. We chose not to move forward with this. So this is our opportunity to take this, which has, maybe it's only 99% or 95%, but if there's something, this is the moment where I could agree that the CSP is a priority. Let's put this on. Let's bring this to a standing committee meeting and add it. This is the purpose of it. So I think this is phenomenal. It lays out everything administration's working on and prioritizing. Now let's own it if we want to tweak it. So I want to thank admin. I think it's good. And I am open to hearing other councillors talk about, is there something missing that we want to prioritize for the next 6 months? So yeah, overall, really satisfied and looking to hear from other members of council if we want to add anything to it or if there's something that should be omitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as I read through this, I definitely was a fan of this layout. I think it articulates exactly, the details needed both for us as council, administration, clear direction, but also I think, excuse me, the biggest thing is it is I think a better tool to communicate to our community members what our priorities are. I think there's some accountability there. There's definitely transparency there. I really liked this layout. I think it's a much better action tracker for sure. And it gives some detail on it and gives us, maybe and even some costing and funding sources, things like that. So I am liking the direction this is taking. And for sure, I mean, if there's anything we can add or to delete, as a council, but I personally like this. It's a great organizational tool and for both us, for everyone involved. So I want to thank administration for their hard work on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor House. CEO Olson.
Mr. Chair, I just want to provide a little bit of clarification of how the documents work together. So the strategic plan has I guess the priority focus areas. So they are not necessarily actions. They're areas of focus that council would like to see some movement on, and there's some information that's included in the strategic plan. Once that's reviewed with administration annually, as we prepare for budget, we start putting together this action plan. So these are actions. They've got qualitative and quantitative pieces within them, so that we can measure and we can see the movement and I guess forward momentum on the strategic plan. It's a piece that we've been missing, and it's difficult to communicate that progress to the community, and it's difficult to track as far as performance measurement for the organization itself. So that's really what the intention of the action plan is. It's a series of actions. There is that intention of collaboration with council to make sure that we're all aligned with what those actions are and why they're there and how they support the strat plan. Bringing this forward tonight just to close off the process for 2021, because we're a little bit out of sequence. So strat plan, then the corporate vision action plan, and then budget. We did strat plan, budget, and now the corporate vision action plan, just to demonstrate how they all can kind of fit together. So then prior to budget, we take a look, or the actions are established. If any of them need budget, then we know these are focus areas for the budget that council would like to see. So this is a process that other communities use. Stony Plain is a good example. Sure, we ended up adding that as an attachment, but it's something that we can provide to council. It makes that process really clear, and again, for measurement, communication, and progress on these items, and alignment as well. It's something that administration has seen work very well in other communities.
Great. Appreciate the clarity, CEO Olson, on how the different documents fit together and work together. Council, is there anything further? Michaels?
I'll defer to Councillor Hawes. I wanted to sort of hear more from council before I give a direction. Thank you.
I was going to do the same thing. So if there's more councillors that want to speak to it, but I'm prepared to make direction here unless there's others in the queue.
No one else in the queue.
I'd like to then
after the directions made, council is still welcome to speak to it too. So that's fine. Councillor Hawes.
If Mayor Michaels is okay with it, I'm going to move that committee accept the 2021 Corporate Vision Action Plan for information. And I think I've spoke to it enough. I do like the document, and we'll continue to move forward with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a direction request before us now. Councillor, is there any further comments, questions, discussion, or debate? Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councillor Nelson. I know I've talked to a few councillors about this. The CSP not being there, and it's been ongoing. I understand we have to prioritize something, but this is our opportunity. I'd like a deliverable on the CSP. There's, I guess, two ways to go about this. Do we want to bring this back to a standing, or do we want to direct administration to include a CSP deliverable and bring this back as an information item with that included? So administration can then place with all these other things in motion where they can kind of fit it in, and then we can have a discussion where it falls, or we can, kind of, do it ourselves. So that's my only reservation, that I too would be remiss that the CSP isn't in this. I want to show the community that it is important to us, and we have kind of put it on the back burner for some time, and that's on council, but I'd like to rectify that. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson?
I'll be supporting accepting it for information. To me, we're a big chunk of the way through 2021 already. I look at this as an example of what we're doing moving forward. and to spend, weeks and months updating something that really is just an example of what we're going to do moving forward, I just don't see it being a great use of our time. We can achieve CSP conversations through agenda prep, through the chair, through motions. I think there may be outstanding motions from the CSP anyways. So I think the document's fine. I think it'll give us some opportunity to figure out what we do with it during budget. And I look forward to seeing the evolution and a more direct tie to our strat plan, but that'll come later. So I actually really like the document, and I look forward to where it ends up after budget. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council. Okay, if there's nothing further, we will call the direction to question. That committee accept the 2021 Corporate Vision Action Plan for information. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that was carried 5-1. All right, is there anything further regarding the 2021 Corporate Vision Action Plan before we move on? Okay, that brings us to council reporting. I will start with Councillor Magoon because he happens to be talking to my right.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few things I'd like to mention. One, movement forward on the waste management contract. We've established a schedule now. Interviews are taking place with individuals, and then a schedule for working sessions, 3 in particular over the next few weeks. So excited about that. Had the opportunity, I attended the FCSS spring regional meeting. I know Mayor Michaels was there as well, along with all the representatives from FCSS across the region. Got to say that the list is too large to go through, trying to keep track of all the different programs that are happening throughout the region, but it's just shows how every community is different, the needs and what is required from FCSS in the communities. But just to know that, man, these are some dedicated staff dealing with, ongoing changes, the budget limitations that they've experienced over the number of months. Some programs, have maybe 1.5 persons and trying to accommodate the needs of the community, especially during COVID right now too, with all the, virtual and stuff. But one of the targets that a lot of communities are targeting are senior loneliness. There's a lot, especially with the lack of knowledge with technology, and but trying to reach out to those members of our communities are a high priority, along with also children as well. So, but just really want to highlight those the people that are doing all those jobs. And it was sad to see Miss Altragi leaving us, part of that team. So hoping, moving forward, we can find, someone that meets those expectations that she did. The other thing that I attended, I attended the AUMA caucus. Lots of things, were talked about during that. 2 mornings and an afternoon or later evening. One of the things that I want to highlight real quickly, is they had a discussion on reducing red tape. And I want to say that, it was nice to see some of the things they spoke to that our community is working on. Some of it, with the organizational changes that C.A. Olson has initiated with the org charts and things. That was one thing. I know that with our discussions, the use on our land use bylaw and the work that's being done on that, trying to streamline things. There was a couple of things that there was a question of best practices. And one of the things that they learned from, and all this information was brought together with surveying all the communities on red tape and what's being done. They talked a lot about continuous review of processes and upgrades. Is just making sure we're on top of that is one thing. They also spoke to regional partnerships, and they were a big fan also too of user guides. User guides available online for whether it's businesses or whether it's residents or anybody, but being able to access those things to streamline, that information to our residents. And so that was one thing. They also had there was a lot of talk on the referendum that is being proposed in our municipal election. I thought it was interesting that never in history has this ever been done. There is no precedence of a referendum being held during a municipal election to date. And so there was a lot of comments about that and whether it's going to take away from the municipal election. There's also a lot of question too of the money that is going to be distributed to assist. They really haven't figured out all those details. So hopefully that's going to be coming down the pipe soon. Other than that, there was a lot of things going on. Our AUMA president had a long list of different things that they're focusing on as well. From policing to police funding to a variety of different things. So I did have an opportunity. I did ask our Minister McIver specifically about the rest area project. I'll be frank, I was a little disappointed in his answer. I thought he was quite flippant in that he felt that we were, he was quite shocked that municipalities were not amenable to these businesses potentially opening up and these things, even use the words, I'm not sure why we're complaining that it might take a hamburger out of someone's mouth out of your community. So I'm really looking forward to, he is reaching out by phone to the different areas, and to talk about this. He did also mention, and I did follow up both with our mayor and also Mayor Sahara in Edson about, he did say that there was communication prior to the announcement, and both our mayor and also Mayor of Edson confirmed that there was no communication whatsoever with municipalities along that corridor, any discussion. So it'll be interesting to see where he stands in that conversation. I believe later next month that it's happening. So there's, more, if there's any questions or anything in regards to that, but it was good conversation. They had lots of minister involvement and a lot of questions. They did have some RFDs, requests for decisions as well, around justice and equalization or availability to justice, legal representation. And there was a couple others as well, but yeah, it was a good turnout. They had I think it was over 400 and some people turned out to it. So they were quite impressed with that. And they are looking forward to moving forward to a face-to-face AUMA in the fall. But they are and have heard that they do want to have a hybrid of both face-to-face and virtual, which gives more opportunity for more counselors and municipal staff to attend. So they're planning for that, hoping, crossing fingers, COVID is safer by then. And other than that, I have a library board meeting coming up. We haven't had any conversations yet since the closure again. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the group and seen what that conversation looks like. So that's all I have to report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Wall.
Nothing to report here, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was able to take part in 2 of the 3 days of the AUMA Spring Caucus. I won't touch on it too much more. Had a youth council meeting last week, which seems to be getting some traction. We seem to be moving forward a bit more and kind of finding our legs in the virtual environment, which has been certainly a challenge. Thursday as well had BSN, which I imagine our mayor will speak to, so I'll leave that for him. And I just want to make the community aware on May 23rd, Rotary's hosting a Shred It event where citizens and businesses can bring their paper to get securely shredded, and that'll be in Parks West Mall. So stay tuned to Rotary. They'll have lots of word out on the details of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hawes, for that update. Yeah, Mr. McIver was quite interesting regarding his comments for that. There's a tentative meeting with MLA Long and Minister McIver on May 17th. Perhaps CA Olson may be able to attend. And I've reached out to Mr. Long's secretary to see if it could be extended to council, or at least for you to listen into. But originally the session was set up for us to discuss. So I'll have something further or a more, I guess, date that's confirmed with them as soon as I have that. Also, BSN, I didn't have my notes on BSN, so thanks for putting me on the spot there, Councillor Nelson. I remember his presentation was along the lines of what are some of the issues with COVID. I'll have an update for that next week. I honestly don't have any notes regarding that, unless somebody else from council attended that. And for me, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. As for myself, I had a Regional Economic Development Coalition meeting last week, and not really too much happened at the meeting to report to council. A lot of it was back and forth update from administration to the HREDC members about some of the stuff we're doing and upcoming things that are on council's agenda regarding business support for the community, including the most funding that we discussed tonight and the outdoor patio option for the restaurants and stuff like that. Getting some feedback from the community, all of which was well received. On behalf of the chamber, Natalie Charlton specifically spoke to thank council and administration for being able to move so quickly on the outdoor patio, outdoor dining option for restaurants in our community, and that they were looking forward to the most discussion that we had tonight. So, and other than that, that's the only meeting that I've had in the last week. So that's all I've got to report. And that brings us to urgent matters from council. Council, are there any urgent matters? Okay, seeing no urgent matters, that brings us to Chief Administrative Officer reporting. CEO Olson.
Mr. Chair. So I want to thank both Mr. Fayez and Ms. Altragi, both be leaving us at the town of Hinton in the coming weeks. Mr. Fayez is our outgoing communications coordinator, and he's provided essential support and hard work that's impacted a lot of us at administration. Just want to extend some thanks and best wishes. And as well, Ms. Altragi joined us several years ago as a communications and economic development summer student before coming on board full-time as legislative and administrative coordinator. In late 2018, she accepted the position with FCSS and has done exemplary work in that area, and we're very fortunate to have had her on board. Thank you both for incredible contributions and best wishes. We'll miss you both, so thank you so much. And I'll move into council action pending list. There's one main item that I just want to bring council's attention to, and that is MD 2220. In March, there was a motion to move funds from the pool locker replacement to the rec center construction reserve. This action could not be completed, and this is due to the funds supporting the project being provided through gas tax funding. So this wasn't a contribution to a reserve from a reserve to fund this. This is project-based funding that's predetermined. So the movement of those funds into the reserve can't occur. However, you can apply to transfer that money to support a different project. So in short, administration is looking into this. We'll bring forward a report that covers the error, provides some options for council to considered for the use of that funding. So just wanted to highlight that as it couldn't be moved off the list until we sort out some of those moving pieces. So otherwise, not too many material things have changed. And if council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything on that.
Great, thank you, CA Olson. Council, any questions for CA Olson? Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, thanks for sending the email to council regarding the delay in the bridge decision. I was just curious if there was a date that we should expect that to come forward. I know the public's watching it quite closely.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. CA Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administration was aiming to see if we could turn it around and bring it next week at the special meeting, as it is a kind of an emerging item. I don't have a confirmed date if it would make it to that meeting. There are a couple pieces of information we were waiting on prior to bringing it forward to council for discussion that really impacted that discussion. So some of those pieces we are learning and in a good position. Otherwise, it will come May 11th for discussion.
Perfect. That's I think for the community, it's more, is it delaying 6 months or a year? If it's, you know, coming in the next few meetings, I think we're fine with that. So thanks for that follow-up.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council, are there any other or any other questions for CA Olson regarding action pending? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, CA Olson. That brings us to legislative services update. Ms. Rendell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rendell. Executive Assistant Logistics Information, Ms. Anderson.
And I have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Anderson. Council, that brings us to the end of the agenda. We'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. Councilor Nelson.
Move that we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor?